Welcome. Tonight, we journey into one of humanity's most ancient mysteries, the story of the Anunnaki, gods from the stars, builders of civilization, or perhaps simply the fascinating mythology of a remarkable ancient culture. As you settle into comfort, let your breathing slow. There is no need to concentrate too closely. Allow the words to wash over you like gentle waves. Whether you drift into sleep or simply rest, this journey through ancient Mesopotamia awaits you. The Anunnaki. The very name carries weight. It echoes across millennia, from clay tablets pressed in ancient Sumer to modern bestsellers and documentaries. But what truth lies beneath the layers of interpretation, speculation, and reimagining? Tonight, we separate myth from modern myth, ancient belief from contemporary creation. We will explore what the Sumerians and Babylonians actually believed, and how those beliefs transformed over thousands of years into something quite different. So breathe deeply, relax your shoulders, and let us begin at the very beginning, in the land between two rivers. Part 1. The land between two rivers. Picture, if you will, a landscape of extraordinary fertility. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers flow through an otherwise arid land, bringing life-giving water and rich sediment. Here, in what is now modern Iraq, one of humanity's first great civilizations emerged. This is Mesopotamia. The name itself means between rivers in ancient Greek. But long before Greeks gave it this name, the people who lived here called it differently. The Sumerians knew the southern region as Sumer. The Akkadians called it by other names. Babylon would rise, Assyria would dominate the north. Empire after empire flourished in this cradle of civilization. The rivers dictated everything. They provided water for irrigation, enabling agriculture on a scale never before seen. They offered transportation routes for trade. They brought fish and waterfowl, but they also brought danger. Unlike the predictable flooding of the Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates flooded unpredictably, sometimes violently. The rivers giveth, and the rivers taketh away. In this environment, humanity made a profound leap forward. Here, writing was invented, sometime around 3,200 years before the Common Era. The earliest writing was not poetry or history, but accounting. Records of grain, lists of livestock, trade agreements, the practical necessities of an increasingly complex society. These early marks on clay tablets used a script we now call cuneiform, wedge-shaped impressions made by pressing a reed stylus into soft clay. These tablets were then dried or baked, becoming permanent records. Thousands upon thousands of these tablets have survived. They are our window into ancient Mesopotamian life, religion, economics, and thought. The Sumerians lived in city-states. Each city had its own ruler, its own patron deity, its own character. Uruk, one of the greatest cities, may have been home to 40,000 people or more. Its walls were legendary. Its ziggurat rose toward the heavens. Other great cities included Ur, Eridu, Nippur, Lagash, and many others. These cities were not isolated. They traded with one another, warred with one another, formed alliances and broke them. They shared a common culture even as they competed for resources and prestige. And central to this common culture was religion. The Mesopotamians saw divinity everywhere, in the rivers that sustained them, in the storms that terrified them, in the sun that marked the days and the moon that measured the months, in the fertility of the soil and the abundance of the harvest. The world was alive with divine presence and divine will, and among these divine beings, the Anunnaki held a special place. Shaktatur Part 2, the original Anunnaki. Let us be clear from the very start. The ancient Mesopotamians did believe in beings called the Anunnaki. This is not a modern invention. References to the Anunnaki appear in numerous cuneiform texts spanning more than 2,000 years of Mesopotamian history. But who were they, according to these ancient sources? The etymology of the word Anunnaki is debated, but it likely means something like princely offspring, or those of royal blood. The term appears in various forms across different languages and periods. Anunnaki, Anunna. The slight variations in spelling reflect the complex linguistic landscape of ancient Mesopotamia, where Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian languages intermingled. In the earliest texts, the Anunnaki were gods, not aliens, not astronauts, not ancient genetic engineers. They were deities in the Mesopotamian pantheon, divine beings with powers and responsibilities that exceeded human capabilities. But the Mesopotamian divine realm was complex. Not all gods were equal. There was a hierarchy, much like the hierarchies that structured human society. At the top were the great gods, the most powerful deities who controlled the fundamental forces of the universe. Below them were lesser gods, still divine but more limited in power and scope. The Anunnaki were often described as a collective of deities, sometimes 50 in number, sometimes more. They were associated with the earth and the underworld, in contrast to another group called the Igigi, who were associated with the heavens. One important text, the Babylonian creation epic known as the Enuma Elish, mentions both groups. The Enuma Elish dates to the late 2nd millennium before the Common Era, though it draws on older traditions. In this text, the Igigi are described as labouring for the greater gods, digging rivers and canals. Eventually, they rebel against this endless toil. The god Ea solves the problem by creating humans to take over the labour. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. We will return to creation myths shortly. For now, simply understand that in ancient Mesopotamian thought, the divine realm was structured and complex. The Anunnaki were one category of divine beings among many. Individual gods who were numbered among the Anunnaki included some of the most important deities in the pantheon. Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh water. Enlil, the god of wind and storms. Ninhursag, the mother goddess. Shamash, the sun god and god of justice. Sin, the moon god. Ishtar, the goddess of love and war. These were not obscure deities. They were central to Mesopotamian religious life. Temples were built in their honour. Priests maintained their cults. Kings claimed to rule by their favour. Ordinary people prayed to them for protection, fertility, justice, and mercy. The Anunnaki gathered in assembly to make important decisions. They decreed fates. They passed judgments. In this way, the divine realm mirrored human governance. Just as city elders might gather to settle disputes or decide policy, so too did the gods deliberate together. In texts dealing with the underworld, the Anunnaki appear as judges of the dead. The underworld in Mesopotamian belief was not a place of punishment or reward, in the way later traditions would conceive of an afterlife. It was simply where the dead went, a dark and dusty place beneath the earth. But even there, the Anunnaki maintained order, decreeing the fates of those who had passed from the world of the living. So the original Anunnaki were gods, divine beings in a polytheistic religious system. They had powers, they had roles, they had relationships with humans and with one another. But they were fundamentally religious concepts, expressions of how an ancient people understood the cosmos and their place within it. This is essential to understand, because what the Anunnaki have become in modern imagination is vastly different from what they were in ancient belief. Part 3. Creation stories and flood myths. Every culture has stories about how the world began, how humans came to be, why things are the way they are. Mesopotamia was no exception. In fact, Mesopotamian creation myths are among the oldest recorded stories in human history. These myths were not scientific explanations in the modern sense. They were attempts to make sense of existence through narrative, to embed human life within a framework of meaning provided by the divine, and the Anunnaki played important roles in these stories. The most famous Mesopotamian creation epic is the Enuma Elish. The title comes from the opening words of the text, which mean "when on high." The epic was recited ritually during the Babylonian New Year festival, reinforcing the social and cosmic order. The Enuma Elish tells of a time before creation. In the beginning, there were only two primordial beings, Apsu, representing fresh water, and Tiamat, representing salt water. From their mingling came the first gods, but these gods were noisy and troublesome. Apsu decided to destroy them so he could rest in peace. The younger gods learned of this plan, and Ea, god of wisdom, put Apsu into a deep sleep and killed him. Tiamat was enraged by her consort's death. She created an army of monsters and demons to avenge Apsu. The younger gods were terrified. Finally, Marduk, son of Ea, volunteered to fight Tiamat, but only if the other gods would make him their king. They agreed. Marduk defeated Tiamat in battle, splitting her body in two. From one half, he made the sky. From the other, the earth. Marduk then organized the cosmos, assigning roles to the various gods. He created humanity from the blood of Chingu, Tiamat's second consort and the leader of her monstrous army. Humans were created specifically to serve the gods, to perform the labour that would otherwise occupy divine beings. The Enuma Elish is a myth about order emerging from chaos, about kingship and legitimate authority, about the relationship between gods and humans, and yes, the Anunnaki appear in it, but as divine beings within this mythological framework, not as literal space travellers. Another important creation story comes from the Atrahasis epic. This text is older than the Enuma Elish, dating back to the early 2nd millennium before the Common Era. It too tells of the creation of humans, but with important differences. In the Atrahasis, the gods are divided into two groups. The senior gods, the Anunnaki, assign all the hard labour to the junior gods, the Igigi. For 40 years the Igigi dig canals and rivers, working ceaselessly. Finally they can bear it no longer. They burn their tools and march on the house of Enlil, the chief god. Enlil wants to punish the rebels, but Ea proposes a better solution. Let humanity be created to take over the work. The gods agree. They slaughter one of the rebel gods, Wielu. The mother goddess Ninhursag mixes his blood and flesh with clay, and from this mixture humanity is formed. So humans are created to work, to till the soil, dig the canals, maintain the temples, and make offerings to the gods. This was not seen as demeaning in ancient Mesopotamian thought. It was purpose. It was the reason humans existed. To serve the gods was humanity's sacred duty. The Atrahasis epic continues beyond the creation story. Humans multiply and become numerous, but their noise disturbs Enlil. He sends plagues to reduce their numbers. When that fails, he sends drought. When that fails, he decides to destroy humanity entirely with a great flood. But Ea, who always shows favour to humanity, warns a wise man named Atrahasis. Build a boat, Ea tells him. Save yourself, your family and animals. Atrahasis obeys. The flood comes, devastating and complete. Even the gods are terrified by its violence. After 7 days the waters recede. Atrahasis makes offerings, and the gods, realizing they need humans to sustain them with offerings and labour, agree to let humanity continue, though with limitations on lifespan and fertility. This flood story should sound familiar. It is one of the sources that influenced the biblical flood narrative featuring Noah. The parallels are striking, but this should not surprise us. The biblical authors lived in a world where Mesopotamian culture was dominant and influential. Stories travelled, myths evolved, traditions intermingled. The most famous version of the Mesopotamian flood story appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh. This epic, one of the oldest literary works in human history, tells the story of Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, Gilgamesh is strong and bold, but also arrogant and harsh toward his people. The gods create a wild man, Enkidu, to challenge Gilgamesh. The two fight, become friends, and embark on adventures together. But when they kill the Bull of Heaven, the gods decree that Enkidu must die. His death devastates Gilgamesh and sends him on a quest for immortality. Gilgamesh travels to the ends of the earth seeking Utnapishtim, the one human who has been granted eternal life. When he finally finds Utnapishtim, the immortal man tells Gilgamesh the story of the Great Flood. The story is nearly identical to that in the Atrahasis. Enlil decides to destroy humanity. Ea warns Utnapishtim, the boat is built, the flood comes. When it ends, Utnapishtim makes offerings, and the gods, realizing their mistake, grant him and his wife immortality. But Gilgamesh cannot achieve the same. Despite his efforts, despite his divine ancestry, despite his greatness, he remains mortal. He must accept death as the common fate of humanity. The epic ends with Gilgamesh returning to Uruk, reconciled to his mortality but proud of the great city walls he has built, his lasting legacy. These myths reveal how the ancient Mesopotamians understood their world. Humans exist to serve the gods. Human life is fragile and often at the mercy of divine whim. The gods themselves are not perfect or all-knowing. They make mistakes, feel emotions, and argue among themselves. And through it all, humans must find meaning and purpose in a world they did not create and cannot fully control. The Anunnaki in these stories are simply the gods. They are not aliens conducting experiments. They are not visitors from another planet. They are the divine beings imagined by an ancient people trying to make sense of existence. But breathe deeply. Relax. Whether you're still listening or drifting towards sleep, all is well. The story continues, flowing like the ancient Tigris, carrying us onward through time. Part 4. Daily Life and Religious Practice. Understanding ancient Mesopotamian religion requires us to understand that religion was not separate from daily life. It was woven into every aspect of existence. Work, politics, law, family life, agriculture, warfare. All were understood in religious terms. Each city had its patron deity. Uruk belonged to Anu and Ishtar. Nippur was sacred to Enlil. Eridu was the city of Enki. Ur was home to the moon god Sin. The great ziggurat temple complexes dominated the cities, rising in stepped levels toward the sky. These ziggurats were not primarily places of communal worship in the way we might think of the modern churches or temples. They were, in effect, the houses of the gods. The deity was thought to dwell in the inner sanctuary at the top. Only priests had regular access. The general population would participate in religious festivals and processions, but the daily care of the god was priestly work. This care was quite literal. The statue of the god would be washed, dressed, and presented with meals. Offerings of bread, beer, meat, and other foods were made regularly. The god needed to be maintained and honoured. In return, the god protected the city and ensured its prosperity. Kings claimed to rule by divine favour. Mesopotamian kingship was understood as a gift from the gods. A king was not himself divine, as pharaohs in Egypt were sometimes considered, but rather a human chosen by the gods to rule on their behalf. Kings built temples, restored shrines, and led military campaigns that were framed as divine missions. Legal codes, like the famous Code of Hammurabi, were presented as coming from the gods. Hammurabi depicted himself as receiving his laws from Shamash, the sun god and god of justice. The laws themselves covered everything from property rights to family relations to criminal penalties. Justice was divine will made manifest in human society. Agriculture followed a religious calendar. Planting and harvest were accompanied by rituals and offerings. Festivals marked the turning of the seasons. The New Year festival in Babylon, the Akitu, was a major event lasting many days. It involved processions, ritual reenactments of myths, and the symbolic renewal of the king's right to rule. Ordinary people had their own religious practices. Small figurines and amulets have been found in homes, suggesting personal devotions. People prayed for healing, for protection, for fertility, for success in business. They made vows and offerings. They consulted omens and dreams. Divination was extremely important. The Mesopotamians believed the gods communicated through signs. The movements of stars and planets, the shapes of animal livers, the patterns of oil on water, the behaviour of animals, unusual events, all could be interpreted by skilled specialists to reveal divine will or predict the future. Professional diviners, priests who specialised in reading omens, were consulted by kings and commoners alike. Extensive libraries of omen texts catalogued thousands of signs and their interpretations. If the moon appears with a halo on the first of the month, such and such will happen. If a bird flies from left to right, this means one thing. If from right to left, it means another. This was not superstition in the way we might dismissively use that word today. This was a sophisticated attempt to understand causation and predict outcomes in a world where so much was beyond human control. Crops failed, diseases struck, enemies invaded. If the gods controlled these things, then understanding the gods' will could mean the difference between life and death. The underworld, as mentioned earlier, was called various names: Irkala, Kur, Aralu. It was described as a dark place beneath the earth where the dead resided. All people, regardless of status or virtue, went to the underworld when they died. There was little concept of judgment leading to reward or punishment. Death was simply the common fate. The dead were thought to need sustenance in the afterlife. Funerary offerings and rituals ensured that the deceased would not become restless ghosts. Proper burial was essential. Those who died violent deaths, or who were not properly buried, might haunt the living. In all of this, the Anunnaki as a collective appear primarily in their roles as divine administrators and judges. They decree fates, they maintain cosmic order, they judge the dead. But individual deities who were numbered among the Anunnaki, like Enki or Ishtar, had specific cults and specific relationships with particular cities and people. This was the living, breathing religion of millions of people over thousands of years. It was complex, evolving, and deeply meaningful to those who practiced it. To reduce it to a story about ancient astronauts is to miss entirely the richness and sophistication of Mesopotamian thought. But let your mind wander if it will. There is no need to hold on to every detail. Let the ancient world rise and fall like breath. We continue onward into the realm of texts and tablets. Just Gefragte Part 5. The Evidence We Have. What do we actually know about the Anunnaki? What sources exist? How do scholars study ancient Mesopotamian religion? These questions are essential if we are to separate authentic ancient belief from modern speculation. Our knowledge comes primarily from cuneiform tablets. Hundreds of thousands of them have been excavated from ancient Mesopotamian sites. Many more remain undiscovered or unexcavated. Of those that have been found, not all have been translated. Assyriology, the study of ancient Mesopotamian languages and cultures, is an ongoing field with new discoveries and interpretations still emerging. The tablets contain a wide variety of texts, administrative records, business contracts, personal letters, legal documents, mathematical texts, medical texts, astronomical observations, and yes, religious and mythological texts. Religious texts include hymns, prayers, rituals, and myths. Some are brief, fragmentary. Others are lengthy and complete. The condition of the tablets varies widely. Some are pristine, others are broken, with crucial sections missing. Some texts exist in multiple copies from different time periods, allowing scholars to see how traditions evolved. The Epic of Gilgamesh, for instance, exists in multiple versions. The earliest fragments date to the early 2nd millennium before the Common Era. The most complete version comes from the Library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, dating to the 7th century before the Common Era. Comparing versions reveals how the story changed over time, with new elements added and old ones modified. Translation is challenging work. Cuneiform represents languages that are no longer spoken. Sumerian, which was already a dead language by the time many of our texts were written. Akkadian, with its Babylonian and Assyrian dialects. These languages have grammatical structures, idioms, and cultural references that are foreign to modern readers. Moreover, ancient Mesopotamian thought did not divide concepts the way modern Western thought does. Our categories of religion, philosophy, science, law, and politics would have been meaningless to them. Everything was interconnected. Translating their texts requires not just linguistic skill, but cultural interpretation. When texts mention the Anunnaki, the context varies. Sometimes they are listed as a collective. Sometimes individual gods who belong to the Anunnaki are named. Sometimes their role is specified. Sometimes they appear almost in passing, assumed knowledge that the original audience would have understood without explanation. For example, the descent of Ishtar to the underworld, a myth telling how the goddess Ishtar travels to the realm of the dead, mentions the Anunnaki as judges in the underworld. They decree that Ishtar must die, but the text does not explain who they are. The audience already knew. This is crucial to understand. These texts were not written for us. They were written by and for people who lived in that culture, who shared that worldview, who understood references and context that we must painstakingly reconstruct. Scholars use multiple methods to understand these texts: linguistic analysis, comparison with other texts, archaeological context, study of material culture, comparison with later traditions that may preserve earlier beliefs. It is detective work, piecing together a picture from incomplete evidence. And what picture emerges regarding the Anunnaki? They were a category of deities in a polytheistic system. They were associated with the earth and the underworld. They numbered 50 or more. They were involved in decrees of fate and judgment of the dead. Individual Anunnaki included major gods like Enki and Enlil. There is no ancient text that describes the Anunnaki as coming from the stars. No ancient source calls them astronauts or genetic engineers. No cuneiform tablet describes spaceships or advanced technology. These are modern additions to the story, not ancient beliefs. But where did these modern ideas come from? How did the Anunnaki transform from ancient gods into alien visitors? To answer that, we must leave ancient Mesopotamia and travel to the 20th century of the Common Era. But first, let your breathing deepen. Feel the weight of your body sinking into rest. The ancient world is far away now. We move forward through time, through centuries and millennia, toward the modern age. Joskers Part 6. the birth of ancient astronaut theory. The 20th century witnessed an explosion of interest in ancient civilizations. Archaeology became increasingly scientific. Excavations in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Mexico, Peru, and elsewhere revealed the sophistication and grandeur of ancient cultures. The public was fascinated. This was also the age of rapid technological advancement. Flight became routine, radio, television, and computers transformed communication. Nuclear energy harnessed the atom, and most dramatically, humanity began to explore space. In the 1950s and 60s, space became the new frontier. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik. Yuri Gagarin orbited Earth. The United States committed to landing humans on the moon. Science fiction, already popular, became even more so. The idea that humanity might encounter alien civilizations became not just fantasy, but seemingly plausible speculation. In this context, some authors began to ask provocative questions. What if ancient peoples had encountered advanced beings from other worlds? What if the gods of mythology were really astronauts from distant planets? What if ancient monuments were built with alien help? This was the birth of ancient astronaut theory, and the key figure in popularizing this idea was a Swiss hotelier named Erich von Däniken. In 1968, von Däniken published a book called Chariots of the Gods. The premise was straightforward. Ancient texts, when read literally, describe encounters with technologically advanced beings. Ancient monuments display engineering capabilities beyond what should have been possible. Therefore, Earth was visited by extraterrestrials in ancient times. The book was enormously successful. It sold millions of copies worldwide and was translated into dozens of languages. It spawned sequels, imitators, documentaries, and an entire genre of speculative alternative history. Von Däniken's approach was to take myths and religious texts from various cultures and reinterpret them through a modern technological lens. When the Bible describes Ezekiel seeing wheels within wheels and creatures with multiple faces, von Däniken suggested this was a description of a spaceship. When ancient Indian texts described flying vehicles called vimanas, he interpreted these as actual aircraft. And when ancient Mesopotamian texts described the Anunnaki as descending from the heavens, von Däniken and those who followed him suggested these were not gods at all, but extraterrestrial visitors. The appeal of this idea is understandable. It flatters modern technological society by suggesting that ancient peoples could not have achieved what they did without outside help. It provides a dramatic narrative that combines history, science fiction, and mystery. It suggests that we are not alone in the universe, and that contact with alien intelligence is not only possible, but has already happened. But there are profound problems with ancient astronaut theory, both methodologically and factually. First, it consistently underestimates ancient peoples. The assumption underlying much ancient astronaut speculation is that ancient humans were not smart or capable enough to build pyramids, move large stones, develop agriculture, or invent writing without help. This is simply false. Human ingenuity and capability are constants across history. Ancient peoples were every bit as intelligent as modern peoples. They simply had different knowledge and different tools. Second, ancient astronaut theory cherry-picks evidence. It highlights the mysterious or misunderstood while ignoring context. It quotes selectively from ancient texts, often in translation, without engaging with the full cultural and linguistic context. Third, it treats ancient texts as literal descriptions rather than as the religious, poetic, and mythological literature they actually are. The Mesopotamians did not write scientific textbooks. They wrote myths, hymns, and epics that conveyed cultural values, religious beliefs, and narrative traditions. Fourth, ancient astronaut theory requires ignoring the actual scholarly work done by archaeologists, historians, and linguists who specialize in these cultures. Experts who can read the original languages, who understand the archaeological context, who have devoted careers to studying these civilizations, consistently reject ancient astronaut interpretations. Their rejection is not based on closed-mindedness but on evidence. Yet ancient astronaut theory persists and even flourishes. Television shows devote hour after hour to exploring these ideas. Books and websites multiply. Why? Perhaps because the story is compelling. Perhaps because it speaks to a sense of wonder and a desire for the universe to be more mysterious and exciting than everyday life might suggest. Perhaps because it is easier to engage with a simplified narrative than with the complex realities of academic scholarship. But let us return specifically to the Anunnaki. How did they become central to ancient astronaut theory? The figure most responsible for this was a man named Zecharia Sitchin. Breathe slowly. Let your muscles release their tension. The story continues, but there is no urgency. Time moves strangely here, in this space between waking and sleep. Part 7. Zecharia. Sitchin's interpretation. Zecharia Sitchin was born in Russia in 1920, grew up in Palestine, and eventually settled in the United States. He claimed expertise in ancient languages and history, though he had no formal academic training in Assyriology or related fields. He was an independent scholar, an amateur in the original sense of the word, someone who pursued his interests outside institutional structures. Beginning in 1976 with The 12th Planet, Sitchin published a series of books collectively known as the Earth Chronicles. These books presented an elaborate, alternative history of human civilization based on his interpretations of ancient Mesopotamian texts. Sitchin's central claim was that the Anunnaki were extraterrestrial beings from a planet called Nibiru. According to Sitchin, Nibiru is a large planet in our solar system with an extremely elliptical orbit that takes it far from the Sun for most of its 3,600-year cycle. When Nibiru comes close to Earth, its inhabitants, the Anunnaki, can visit our planet. Sitchin claimed that the Anunnaki first came to Earth approximately 450,000 years ago. They came in search of gold, which they needed to save their planet's atmosphere. They established bases in Mesopotamia and in Africa. They mined gold. And to assist with the labour, they genetically engineered modern humans by combining their own DNA with that of primitive hominids. This genetic engineering, according to Sitchin, explains the sudden appearance of Homo sapiens and our relatively rapid development compared to other species. It also explains ancient myths about gods creating humans. These were not myths at all, but memories of actual events, remembered and passed down through oral tradition until finally written in texts like the Atrahasis. Sitchin claimed to have translated ancient texts that supported his theories. He pointed to cylinder seals, small carved stones that were rolled across clay to create images, which he interpreted as depicting the solar system with an extra planet. He argued that the Mesopotamians had astronomical knowledge far beyond what should have been possible, knowledge given to them by the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki, in Sitchin's telling, established civilization in Sumer. They taught humans agriculture, writing, mathematics, and astronomy. Different Anunnaki factions competed for power and influence, using humans as labourers and soldiers in their conflicts. The biblical flood was caused by the passing of Nibiru, which generated catastrophic tidal effects, though one sympathetic Anunnaki, Enki, warned a human to build an ark. Eventually the Anunnaki left Earth, or at least stopped directly intervening in human affairs, but they may return when Nibiru's orbit brings it close again, and their genetic legacy remains in humanity itself. It is an elaborate, detailed alternative history. Sitchin wrote prolifically, producing book after book, expanding and elaborating his theories. He had followers and influenced many other writers in the alternative history genre. But Sitchin's work has been thoroughly debunked by actual scholars of ancient Mesopotamia. Professional Assyriologists, people who can read cuneiform and who have devoted their careers to studying these cultures, have examined Sitchin's translations and interpretations. The consensus is clear. Sitchin's translations are unreliable. His interpretations are unsupported. His central claims about the Anunnaki being extraterrestrials have no basis in the ancient texts. Let us be specific about the problems with Sitchin's work. First, Sitchin claimed expertise in ancient languages, but professional linguists have shown that his translations are often wildly inaccurate. He mistranslates words, he ignores grammatical context, he assigns meanings to terms that they simply do not have in the original languages. For example, Sitchin claimed that the Sumerian term Nephilim referred to the Anunnaki and meant those who came down from the heavens. But Nephilim is not a Sumerian word. It is Hebrew, appearing in the biblical book of Genesis, and in Hebrew it does not mean those who came down. It more likely means giants, or possibly fallen ones. Sitchin confused and conflated different languages and traditions. Second, the astronomical cylinder seals that Sitchin claimed depicted the solar system have been examined by experts. They do not show what Sitchin claimed. Ancient Mesopotamian astronomical imagery used certain conventions. The objects in these cylinder seals represent stars or gods, not planets. and there is no ancient Mesopotamian text that describes a planet called Nibiru in the way Sitchin described it. The word Nibiru does appear in Akkadian texts. It refers to a celestial body, likely the planet Jupiter or possibly a star. But there is no ancient description of Nibiru as a planet with a 3,600-year orbit or as the home of the Anunnaki. Third, the genetic engineering claim is anachronistic. The ancient Mesopotamians had no concept of genetics or DNA. The creation myths speak of gods moulding humans from clay and divine blood, not of genetic manipulation. To read modern genetics into these texts is to impose concepts that would have been meaningless to the original authors. Fourth, geology and astronomy contradict Sitchin's claims. There is no evidence of a large planet in an elliptical orbit beyond Neptune. If such a planet existed and regularly passed through the inner solar system, it would have profound gravitational effects. We would see those effects. We do not. Similarly, the proposed timeline of Anunnaki visits does not align with what we know of human evolution from the fossil record and genetic evidence. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, evolved in Africa over hundreds of thousands of years through well-documented natural evolutionary processes. There is no sudden appearance requiring extraterrestrial intervention to explain. Yet despite these thorough refutations by experts, Sitchin's ideas remain popular. His books continue to sell. New generations discover them, and the idea that the Anunnaki were ancient astronauts has become, for many people, more real than the actual ancient religious beliefs. This raises an interesting question. Why do these alternative narratives persist even when scholarship has demonstrated their flaws? Perhaps because academic scholarship is not always accessible or engaging to general audiences. Perhaps because the alternative narratives tell more, emotionally satisfying stories. Perhaps because there is a pleasure in believing you know secrets that mainstream authorities deny. But let us be clear, the persistence of a belief does not make it true. Sitchin's Anunnaki are modern myths, created in the 20th century, not ancient realities. Allow yourself to drift if sleep calls to you. There is more to explore, but rest when you need to rest. The words will continue, gentle as a distant tide. Part 8. The appeal of alternative histories. Why do people find alternative histories like Sitchin's so compelling? This is worth considering, not to mock or dismiss, but to understand the human needs and desires that such narratives fulfill. One reason is the appeal of hidden knowledge. Humans are naturally curious. We want to know things others do not. Alternative histories position their adherents as possessing special insight, seeing truth that mainstream academics or the general public miss or suppress. This can be psychologically gratifying, providing a sense of being uniquely informed or enlightened. Another reason is the narrative appeal. Alternative histories often tell more dramatic, more coherent stories than actual history. Real history is messy. Events happen for multiple complex reasons. Cultures develop gradually through countless small innovations. There is no single guiding intelligence, no master plan. Alternative histories simplify this complexity into clear narratives with identifiable actors and understandable motivations. The ancient astronaut narrative, for instance, provides a simple explanation for human achievement. Why did civilization arise? Aliens taught us. Why are there similarities between ancient cultures across different continents? Aliens visited them all. Why do ancient texts describe supernatural beings? They were describing aliens. The narrative has elegant simplicity. There is also a sense of wonder and significance. The idea that we are not alone in the universe, that our ancestors interacted with extraterrestrial intelligence, that human history is part of a cosmic drama. This elevates human existence. It suggests that we matter on a universal scale. Furthermore, alternative histories can serve as critiques of authority. If mainstream historians and scientists are wrong about such fundamental things as human origins, what else might they be wrong about? For people who distrust institutions or feel alienated from mainstream culture, alternative histories provide a framework for that distrust. In some cases, there is also a spiritual or quasi-religious element. Ancient astronaut theories can blend with New Age spirituality, suggesting that humanity is on the verge of a great transformation or reunion with our extraterrestrial creators. This provides hope and meaning in a world that can seem chaotic and meaningless. These are understandable human needs. The desire for meaning, for wonder, for knowledge, for belonging to something larger than oneself. These are not wrong or foolish desires. They are fundamental to being human. The problem arises when these desires lead us to accept false narratives as truth, when we privilege what we want to be true over what evidence supports, when we dismiss expert knowledge not because of genuine flaws in methodology, but because conclusions do not match our preferences. Real history, the history supported by evidence and scholarly study, is actually more wondrous than the alternative versions. Ancient peoples with no outside help developed agriculture. They invented writing. They built massive structures using ingenuity, organisation, and human labour. They created sophisticated mathematical and astronomical systems. They produced great literature and art. They established laws and governance structures. They did all this through human intelligence, creativity, and collaboration. That is genuinely amazing. It requires no extraterrestrials to be extraordinary. Human achievement, purely human achievement, is worthy of wonder and respect. The actual Anunnaki, the gods of ancient Mesopotamia, are fascinating in their own right. They reflect how ancient peoples understood the cosmos, morality, power, and existence. The myths in which they appear reveal sophisticated theological and philosophical thinking. The religious systems built around them sustained complex civilizations for millennia. To replace these real, culturally rich entities with modern science fiction does a disservice to the ancient peoples who created and believed in these gods. It also does a disservice to ourselves, depriving us of genuine engagement with how other humans, in other times and places, have understood reality. But this is not a lecture. Your breathing is steady now, slow and deep. The night surrounds you gently. We move on through the layers of this story. Part 9. Modern Mesopotamian Scholarship. What do actual scholars of ancient Mesopotamia say about all of this? It is worth spending time with the perspectives of people who have devoted their professional lives to understanding these ancient cultures. Assyriology is a specialized field. It requires learning ancient languages, including extinct languages like Sumerian. It requires understanding archaeological methods and contexts. It requires familiarity with thousands of years of cultural development across multiple empires and dynasties. It is demanding, rigorous work. Assyriologists study cuneiform tablets in museums and collections around the world. They participate in archaeological excavations. They compare texts, trace the evolution of myths and ideas, reconstruct ancient pronunciation and grammar. They publish their findings in academic journals where other experts can scrutinize and challenge their work. This is the slow, careful process of building reliable knowledge. When Assyriologists encounter claims like Sitchin's, their response is not hostility or closed-mindedness. It is correction based on evidence. They point out specific errors in translation. They provide context that alternative theories ignore. They explain what the ancient texts actually say. For example, Michael Heiser, who held a PhD in Hebrew Bible and Semitic languages, wrote extensively debunking Sitchin's work. Heiser demonstrated, point by point, how Sitchin mistranslated texts, invented meanings for words, and ignored grammar. Heiser invited anyone who doubted him to learn the ancient languages themselves and check the original sources. The evidence is available to anyone willing to do the work. Other Assyriologists have made similar critiques, not because they are protecting some orthodoxy or covering up truth, but because Sitchin's claims do not hold up to scrutiny. When you actually read the texts in the original languages, when you understand the cultural context, when you trace how ideas evolved over time, the ancient astronaut interpretation collapses. But there is a challenge here. Academic scholarship is not always accessible to general audiences. Academic papers are written for other scholars, using technical jargon and assuming background knowledge. Academic debates happen in specialized journals that most people never see. The conclusions of scholarship filter out to the public slowly and incompletely. Meanwhile, popular books and television shows reach millions. They are entertaining, visually engaging, narratively compelling. They require no specialized knowledge to enjoy. The asymmetry is obvious. Bad ideas that are entertainingly presented will often spread more widely than good scholarship that is dryly presented. Some scholars have tried to bridge this gap. Books written for general audiences that present actual ancient Mesopotamian history and religion. Documentaries that consult actual experts. websites and social media accounts where Assyriologists engage with the public. These efforts make a difference, but they are fighting an uphill battle against the sheer volume and appeal of alternative narratives. There is also the question of how to engage with people who believe alternative histories. Mockery and condescension do not work. They only deepen the divide and strengthen the sense that mainstream scholars are arrogant gatekeepers. But patient explanation can sometimes reach people who are genuinely curious and open to evidence. The key is to make ancient history accessible and engaging on its own terms, to show that the real story is worth knowing, that actual ancient peoples and their beliefs and achievements are fascinating without needing to invent alien interventions. For instance, the actual development of cuneiform writing is an incredible story. It begins with simple pictographs representing concrete objects. Over centuries, these evolve into abstract symbols representing sounds and ideas. The process shows human creativity and adaptation. Different scribes and cities develop slight variations. Standards emerge. The writing system spreads to other languages. It is a window into how human communication and culture evolve. Or consider the actual construction of ziggurats. We have archaeological evidence of how they were built. Sun-dried and baked mud bricks. Reed reinforcements. Massive labour forces organised by temple and palace bureaucracies. Engineering knowledge developed over generations. Trial and error. Innovation. Pride in craftsmanship. These structures were built by humans, and that makes them more impressive, not less. The actual Epic of Gilgamesh, read and appreciated as ancient literature, is profoundly moving. Its meditation on mortality, friendship, the limits of power, the search for meaning. These themes are universal and timeless. The epic does not need to be a coded message about aliens to matter. It matters because it is a great work of human literature. Actual Mesopotamian astronomy is sophisticated and impressive. The Mesopotamians observed the heavens carefully over centuries. They tracked planets, predicted eclipses, understood cycles. They did this without telescopes, without modern mathematics, through patient observation and record-keeping. Their achievement stands on its own. So the work of modern scholarship is not to debunk for the sake of debunking, but to recover and present what actually happened. To honour ancient peoples by understanding them in their own terms, to show that human history, real human history, is extraordinary. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let the details wash over you. The night deepens. The ancient world recedes into the comfortable distance of dreams and half-remembered stories. Part 10. Comparative Mythology. One interesting aspect of the Anunnaki phenomenon is how it fits into broader patterns of comparative mythology. Myths from around the world share certain themes and structures. Gods create humans. Floods destroy the world. Heroes undertake impossible quests. The dead journey to an underworld. These similarities have been noted for centuries. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, scholars like James Frazer and Joseph Campbell tried to identify universal patterns in mythology. Fraser's The Golden Bough catalogued myths and rituals from cultures worldwide, looking for common elements. Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces proposed a universal monomyth, a hero's journey that appears in stories across cultures. The explanations for these similarities vary. Some scholars emphasize human universals. We all face death, wonder about our origins, deal with natural disasters, and struggle with moral questions. So it is not surprising that our myths address these common concerns, even if specific details vary. Other scholars emphasize diffusion. Cultures in contact share stories. Trade routes, migrations, conquests all facilitate the spread of myths. A story that originates in one place can travel and be adapted by other cultures. The flood myth is a good example. Versions appear in Mesopotamia, the Hebrew Bible, ancient Greece, India, and many other cultures. Some of these similarities are likely due to diffusion. The biblical flood story was influenced by Mesopotamian prototypes, but flood myths also appear in cultures with no apparent contact, suggesting that catastrophic flooding is a common enough human experience that different cultures independently create myths to explain and memorialize it. Ancient astronaut theorists often point to these similarities as evidence of alien contact. If multiple ancient cultures describe gods descending from the sky, they argue, perhaps they all witnessed the same phenomenon, extraterrestrial visitors. But this explanation is unnecessary. We do not need aliens to explain why multiple cultures have sky gods. The sky is universally visible and universally mysterious. The sun, moon, and stars affect human life directly. Weather comes from the sky. Naturally, many cultures imagine divine beings associated with the sky. Similarly, we do not need aliens to explain why multiple cultures built pyramids or pyramid-like structures. A pyramid is a stable structure, easy to build with stone or earth. It naturally emerges when you want to build something tall and lasting without advanced engineering techniques. The pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the step pyramids of Mesoamerica, these emerged independently, not from shared alien instruction, but from shared architectural logic. Comparative mythology is valuable when done carefully. It can reveal both the universal and the particular in human culture. But it must be grounded in evidence and context. Cherry-picking similarities while ignoring differences leads to false conclusions. The Anunnaki, as ancient Mesopotamian deities, have parallels in other polytheistic pantheons. The Greek Titans, children of primordial deities, bear some conceptual similarity. Hindu devas and asuras, gods and anti-gods, reflect a similar divine hierarchy and conflict. Norse gods dwelling in Asgard while humans live in Midgard echoes the Mesopotamian cosmic structure. These parallels are interesting, but they do not indicate a shared historical origin in alien contact. They indicate that humans across cultures have grappled with similar questions and found similar narrative structures useful for organising their understanding. Joseph Campbell famously said, "The latest incarnation of Oedipus, the continued romance of Beauty and the Beast, stand this afternoon on the corner of 42nd Street and 5th Avenue, waiting for the traffic light to change." He meant that mythic patterns recur because they address permanent features of human existence. The danger of ancient astronaut theory is that it flattens this rich diversity of human myth-making into a single literal explanation. It suggests that ancient peoples were not creative storytellers, theologians and philosophers, but merely recorders of alien encounters. This diminishes both the ancients and ourselves. Your breathing is slow, and even now, the concepts drift and blend. Mythology and history, ancient and modern, truth and interpretation, all flow together like rivers meeting the sea. Jat, Part 11. The Psychology of Belief. Why do some people believe in ancient astronaut theories while others do not? This is partly a question of psychology, of how humans process information and form beliefs. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We evolved to detect patterns because pattern recognition confers survival advantages. Recognizing that certain clouds mean rain, that certain animal tracks mean prey or predator, that certain facial expressions indicate danger or safety, these abilities kept our ancestors alive. But pattern recognition can lead us astray. We sometimes see patterns that are not there. We see faces in clouds, hear voices in random noise, find meaningful connections in coincidence. This is called pareidolia and apophenia. It is a normal feature of human cognition, not a failing. Ancient astronaut theories exploit this tendency. They present patterns. Look how many cultures have flood myths. Look how many ancient structures align with stars. Look how many texts mention beings from the sky. The human brain, wired to find patterns, finds these connections compelling. Confirmation bias also plays a role. Once we adopt a belief, we tend to notice evidence that supports it and ignore evidence that contradicts it. If you believe the Anunnaki were aliens, you will interpret every ambiguous text or artifact in light of that belief. Contrary evidence will be dismissed or rationalized away. The backfire effect can make this worse. When people are presented with evidence contradicting their beliefs, they sometimes become more entrenched in those beliefs rather than reconsidering them. Being told you are wrong can feel like an attack, triggering defensive responses. There is also the Dunning-Kruger effect. People with limited knowledge in a domain tend to overestimate their understanding. Someone who has read Sitchin's books might feel quite informed about ancient Mesopotamia without realizing how much they do not know. They lack the knowledge necessary to recognize the gaps in their knowledge. Social factors matter too. Belief systems provide community. People who believe in ancient astronaut theories connect with others who share that belief. They attend conferences, participate in online forums, watch the same shows. This social reinforcement strengthens belief and makes it harder to change one's mind, because changing your mind might mean losing your community. Authority and credibility are complex. Most people cannot personally verify most things they believe. We rely on trusted authorities. For someone who trusts mainstream scientists and historians, scholarly consensus carries weight. But for someone who distrusts those institutions, alternative authorities like Sitchin or Von, Däniken might seem more credible. This distrust can be rooted in various factors: negative experiences with education, cultural alienation, political ideology, exposure to instances where mainstream authorities were wrong or misleading. Once trust is broken, it is hard to rebuild. There is also the appeal of simplicity. Complex explanations require more cognitive effort than simple ones. Aliens did it is simpler than thousands of people laboured for decades using techniques we can partially reconstruct from archaeological evidence and experimental archaeology. The simple explanation has cognitive appeal even if it is wrong. Motivated reasoning enters the picture too. If believing in ancient astronauts makes life more exciting, provides meaning, or serves other psychological needs, people will be motivated to maintain that belief. Rational evaluation of evidence becomes secondary to emotional satisfaction. None of this means believers in alternative histories are stupid. Intelligence and education do not make one immune to these cognitive biases. Very intelligent people can rationalize beliefs using sophisticated arguments. Education in one field does not confer expertise in another. A brilliant engineer might be quite credulous about history. Understanding the psychology of belief should encourage humility. We are all subject to these biases. The solution is not to mock or condescend, but to cultivate intellectual habits that counteract our biases, actively seeking out contrary evidence, recognizing when we are reasoning defensively, being willing to say, "I don't know," valuing truth over comfort. And perhaps, in the context of this documentary designed to ease you towards sleep, recognizing that belief is complex, that people are doing their best to make sense of a confusing world, and that grace and patience serve better than contempt. Let your jaw relax. Let your thoughts slow. The night is gentle. The story continues its soft unfolding. Shakasiem, Part 12. Ancient Technology and Human Ingenuity. One of the pillars of ancient astronaut theory is the claim that ancient peoples could not have achieved certain technological feats without outside help. Massive stone structures, precise astronomical knowledge, advanced metallurgy, all of these are presented as evidence of alien intervention. But this claim rests on underestimating human capability. Let us consider what ancient peoples actually achieved and how they achieved it. The pyramids of Egypt are often cited as impossibly difficult. How could Bronze Age peoples move blocks weighing several tons? How could they achieve such precision? Surely aliens or lost advanced civilizations must have helped. But we actually know quite a bit about how the pyramids were built. Archaeological evidence, tomb paintings, tool marks on stones, experimental archaeology all provide insight. The Egyptians used ramps, sledges, rollers, and levers. They had copper tools, later bronze. They organised massive labour forces, likely paid workers rather than slaves, contrary to popular belief. They had skilled engineers who understood principles of leverage and geometry. Experimental archaeologists have demonstrated these techniques. Modern people, using only ancient tools and methods, have successfully moved multi-ton stones. It requires effort, organisation, and know-how, but it is entirely possible. The precision of the pyramids impresses but does not mystify when you understand ancient Egyptian knowledge. They had sophisticated mathematics. They used plumb bobs and levels. They understood surveying. The precision was achieved through careful measurement and skilled craftsmanship, not alien lasers. Similarly, Stonehenge in England, the statues of Easter Island, the stone walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, all have been presented as impossibly difficult, and all have been explained through archaeological research and experimental reconstruction. Humans did these things. Humans are capable of impressive feats when motivated, organised, and knowledgeable. Ancient astronomical knowledge is also cited as evidence of alien contact. The Maya calendar is accurate. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek device, models planetary motions. How could ancient peoples know such things? Through observation and mathematics. The sky is a laboratory that every culture has access to. Watch the sky night after night, year after year, generation after generation. Record what you see. Patterns emerge. The sun's path through the stars over the course of the year, the phases of the moon, the movements of planets. With patient observation and mathematical modelling, These can be predicted with impressive accuracy. The Maya observed the sky from specially designed buildings. They recorded their observations over centuries. They developed sophisticated base 20 mathematics. The result was a calendar of remarkable precision. No aliens required, just human intelligence and dedication. The Antikythera mechanism is an astonishing device, recovered from a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera. Dating to around the 2nd century before the Common Era, it is a complex bronze gearwork device that modelled the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. It could predict eclipses. It is more sophisticated than anything else known from that period. But it is not inexplicable. It represents the pinnacle of Hellenistic technology, building on centuries of Greek astronomical observation and mechanical innovation. We know the Greeks had advanced astronomy. We know they had skilled metal workers. The Antikythera mechanism is surprising but not impossible. It shows what can be achieved when scientific knowledge and technological skill combine. Ancient metallurgy also impresses. Bronze requires combining copper and tin, sometimes from distant sources, and smelting them at high temperatures. Iron requires even higher temperatures. Steel, an alloy of iron and carbon, demands precise control of carbon content and heating. Ancient peoples developed all of these through trial and error, accumulated knowledge, and specialized expertise. They did not understand the chemistry in modern terms, but they understood the processes practically. They knew what worked even if they did not know why in the same way we do. In some cases, ancient technologies were lost and had to be rediscovered. Roman concrete, for instance, was superior in some ways to modern concrete, particularly in durability when exposed to seawater. The specific recipe was lost when the Roman Empire fell. Only recently have we figured out what made Roman concrete special. This does not mean aliens taught the Romans. It means knowledge can be lost when civilizations decline, and rediscovering it takes effort. Damascus steel, famous for its strength and beauty, is another example. The exact technique for making it was lost. Modern metallurgists have worked out possible methods, but we are not certain we have recreated it exactly. Again, this shows that specialized knowledge can disappear, not that aliens were involved. The point is that human beings are clever, observant, patient, and capable. Given time and motivation, we solve problems, develop technologies, and achieve remarkable things. Ancient peoples were no different. They did not need extraterrestrial help. They had human ingenuity, and that was enough. Recognizing this should fill us with admiration for our ancestors. They started with stone and wood and figured out how to smelt metal. They started with counting on fingers and developed sophisticated mathematics. They started with oral stories and invented writing. Every technology we take for granted began with someone figuring something out, then teaching others, then building on that knowledge. That is the real story of human civilization. It is gradual, cumulative, collaborative, and entirely human. It is a story worth celebrating. But let your attention drift if it wants to. The night is deep. The stars above ancient Mesopotamia are the same stars above you now, timeless, constant, indifferent to theories and interpretations. Part 13. The role of popular media. The persistence and spread of ancient astronaut theories owes much to popular media. Television, in particular, has been crucial in disseminating these ideas to mass audiences. The most significant program is Ancient Aliens, which premiered on the History Channel in 2010. The show presents ancient astronaut theories as legitimate alternative history, interviewing proponents and visiting ancient sites. It has run for many seasons, producing hundreds of episodes. The format is formulaic. Dramatic narration poses questions. Could ancient peoples have built this without help? Interviews with ancient astronaut theorists provide speculative answers. Images of ancient art and architecture are shown with dramatic music. The phrase, "ancient astronaut theorists say," yes, has become a meme, recognizing the show's predictable structure. The show rarely features actual archaeologists or historians, or when it does, their statements are often edited selectively. The presentation creates a false sense that ancient astronaut theory is a legitimate scholarly debate rather than a fringe belief rejected by experts. This matters because television lends credibility. Appearing on the History Channel, a network ostensibly devoted to factual programming, makes claims seem more legitimate than they are. Viewers assume that if it is on the History Channel, it must be at least plausible. The show's success has spawned similar programs. In Search of Aliens. Ancient Aliens Declassified. Other networks have produced similar content. The proliferation reinforces the ideas in viewers' minds through repetition. The internet has amplified this further. YouTube hosts thousands of videos promoting ancient astronaut theories. Websites and blogs elaborate on the ideas. Social media allows believers to connect and share content. Algorithms designed to maximize engagement often recommend increasingly extreme content to users who show interest in alternative history. This creates echo chambers. People who believe in ancient astronauts consume media that reinforces that belief and connect with others who share it. Contrary information is less likely to penetrate this bubble. Documentaries intended for entertainment blur the line between fact and speculation. Producers prioritize dramatic presentation over accuracy. Controversial claims attract viewers. Balanced, nuanced discussions are less exciting. Some filmmakers defend this by saying they are just asking questions or presenting alternative viewpoints. But there is an ethical responsibility in how information is presented. Giving equal time to legitimate scholarship and fringe theories creates false equivalence. It suggests both are equally credible when they are not. Books continue to play a role as well. Publishers release new titles on ancient astronauts regularly. These books often recycle old claims while adding new speculation. They sell because there is an audience hungry for these ideas. The commercial incentives are clear. Fringe theories sell. They're exciting and contrarian. Publishers, television producers, and content creators profit from promoting these ideas. Accuracy is secondary to marketability. Meanwhile, actual scholarly work on ancient Mesopotamia, when it reaches popular audiences at all, is often presented in less engaging ways. Academic documentaries can be dry. Scholarly books, even those written for general readers, lack the sensational appeal of ancient astronaut narratives. This is not inevitable. Good science communication, good history communication can be engaging and accurate. Some scholars and science communicators have shown this. Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos presented scientific ideas with wonder and beauty. Mary Beard's documentaries on ancient Rome were both scholarly, rigorous, and accessible. Podcasts like The History of Rome or Hardcore History attract large audiences with careful research presentations, but these require skill, resources, and commitment to both accuracy and engagement. They require treating audiences as intelligent people capable of appreciating complexity, and they require platforms willing to prioritize education over sensationalism. The media landscape is changing. More content is produced than ever before. Audiences fragment into niche interests. In this environment, both good and bad ideas can find audiences. The challenge is helping people develop critical thinking skills to evaluate what they encounter. Media literacy matters, understanding how to assess sources, recognizing logical fallacies, distinguishing evidence-based claims from speculation. These skills help people navigate an information-rich but quality-variable media environment. Educational institutions have a role to play, teaching not just facts, but how to think about facts, how to evaluate claims, how to recognize when you need expertise you do not possess. These are life skills applicable far beyond questions about the Anunnaki. But for now, in this quiet moment, these concerns can fade. The soft voice continues. The darkness is comfortable. You are safe and at ease. Part 14. Cultural Impact and Legacy. The modern reinterpretation of the Anunnaki has had broader cultural impacts beyond just alternative history. These ideas have filtered into fiction, spirituality, conspiracy theories, and popular consciousness. In fiction, ancient astronaut themes appear regularly. Science fiction has explored the idea of ancient alien contact in countless variations. Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 A Space Odyssey features an alien monolith that influences human evolution. Stargate, both the film and the long-running television series, built its entire premise on ancient aliens, with the Egyptian gods being extraterrestrial beings who ruled Earth in antiquity. These fictional works do not claim to be fact, but they may still influence how people think about ancient history. Fiction and fact can blur in memory. A compelling story in a film or novel can feel true emotionally even if intellectually we know it is fiction. In spiritual and New Age contexts, the Anunnaki have been incorporated into various belief systems. Some claim to channel the Anunnaki or receive messages from them. Others see the Anunnaki as part of a cosmic narrative about humanity's spiritual evolution. These spiritual appropriations often mix Sitchin's ideas with other alternative beliefs. Atlantis, Lemuria, ascended masters, crystalline energy, all blend together into syncretic belief systems. The Anunnaki become cosmic guardians or malevolent controllers depending on the specific narrative. Conspiracy theories have also incorporated the Anunnaki. Some versions of New World Order, conspiracy theories claim that the Anunnaki control human affairs through secret societies or political elites. These theories often have anti-Semitic undertones, as conspiracy theories frequently do, with the Anunnaki standing in for traditional anti-Semitic tropes about shadowy controllers. This is a troubling aspect of how alternative histories can be weaponized. What might seem like innocent speculation about ancient history can be linked to harmful ideologies. The line from ancient astronauts created humans to certain people are descended from aliens, and therefore superior or different, is shorter than it should be. In popular consciousness, the Anunnaki name recognition has increased dramatically. People who know little about ancient Mesopotamia might still have heard of the Anunnaki from television shows, documentaries, or casual conversation. This creates a distorted understanding where a modern myth is better known than the ancient reality. For scholars who study actual Mesopotamian history and religion, this is frustrating. Their work is overshadowed by popularized distortions. When they teach about ancient Mesopotamia, students sometimes bring preconceptions from ancient astronaut theories. Correcting these misconceptions requires spending time that could be used for actual education. On the other hand, the popularity of ancient astronaut theories does indicate public interest in ancient civilizations. People find the ancient world fascinating. If that interest can be redirected toward accurate history, that is positive. The challenge is meeting people where they are and guiding them toward better information without condescension. Some educational initiatives have tried this. Museums with Mesopotamian collections create engaging exhibits. Websites offer accessible introductions to cuneiform and ancient cultures. YouTube channels dedicated to archaeology and history present information in entertaining formats. The British Museum, for instance, has extensive Mesopotamian collections and provides educational resources online. The University of Pennsylvania Museum has one of the world's great collections of cuneiform tablets and works to make them accessible. These institutions understand that engaging the public is part of their mission. Individual scholars on social media sometimes engage directly with ancient astronaut claims, patiently explaining where they go wrong. This can be thankless work, as true believers are often not persuaded, but it may influence people who are genuinely curious and open to evidence. The legacy of the Anunnaki, both ancient and modern, is thus complex. The original deities were part of a rich religious tradition that shaped one of humanity's first great civilizations. The modern reinterpretation, while factually wrong, reveals something about contemporary culture, our fascination with the mysterious, our relationship with authority and expertise, our need for meaning in a vast universe. Understanding both the ancient reality and the modern myth helps us think more clearly about how we know what we know, about the difference between evidence and speculation, about respecting other cultures and not imposing our categories on them, about the importance of critical thinking in an age of information abundance. But these are heavy thoughts for the dark hours. Let them drift away. Your breathing is deep and slow. The ancient gods, whatever they were, are not here now. Only rest. Only peace. Only the gentle voice guiding you through the night. Part 15. The persistence of mystery. Despite everything we have discussed, despite the evidence and scholarship, ancient Mesopotamia retains genuine mysteries. There are things we do not know, questions we cannot answer, gaps in our understanding. This is true of all historical periods, but especially of ancient ones. The further back in time we go, the less evidence survives. Clay tablets are durable, but many have been lost or destroyed. Sites remain unexcavated. Languages have nuances we may never fully recover. Cultural contexts that were obvious to original audiences are obscure to us. For instance, we have the Epic of Gilgamesh, but we do not know how it was performed or received. Was it recited in temples, in royal courts? How did audiences respond? Did they see it as religious truth, as entertaining fiction, as historical legend? We can speculate, but we cannot know with certainty. We have extensive records of economic transactions, but understanding the lived experience of ordinary people is harder. What did a typical farmer in Sumer think about the gods? What were daily family dynamics like? What made people laugh or cry? These human details are harder to reconstruct than political histories or economic systems. Some mysteries are more concrete. There are archaeological sites whose purpose is unclear, objects whose function is unknown, texts that defy complete translation. Scholars work on these problems, and sometimes progress is made, but some questions may never be answered. This is as it should be. History is not a complete closed book. It is an ongoing investigation. New discoveries change our understanding. In 1974, archaeologists in Syria discovered the ancient city of Ebla, including an archive of thousands of tablets. These revealed previously unknown details about 3rd millennium Mesopotamian culture and language. Future discoveries may similarly expand our knowledge. The persistence of mystery is not a license for wild speculation. Not knowing something is not evidence for any particular alternative explanation. We don't fully understand this does not mean therefore aliens. It just means there is more work to do. Ancient astronaut theorists often exploit these gaps. They point to anything not fully explained and insert their preferred narrative. But this is an argument from ignorance. The absence of a complete explanation is not evidence for a specific alternative. Real scholars are comfortable saying we don't know. It is not a failing. It is honesty. Science and scholarship are not about claiming certainty where none exists. They are about building the best understanding we can based on available evidence and being willing to revise that understanding when new evidence emerges. The mystery that remains around ancient Mesopotamia is the kind that invites investigation, not fantasy. It invites learning cuneiform to read texts firsthand. It invites participating in excavations. It invites careful analysis and thoughtful interpretation. It invites patience and humility. There is a particular kind of wonder that comes from genuine learning. The wonder of understanding how people thousands of years ago thought and lived. The wonder of holding a clay tablet and knowing you are touching something that hands shaped in antiquity. The wonder of seeing patterns in data that reveal something previously unknown. This wonder is quieter than the sensational thrill of alien theories. It does not promise easy answers or cosmic significance. But it is deeper and more lasting. It connects us to the real human past. It honours those who came before by trying to understand them truly. Ancient Mesopotamia offers this opportunity. To learn about the first cities, the invention of writing, the development of law, the flowering of literature. To see how humans, with the same basic mental capacities we have today, created complex civilizations. To recognise both how different they were from us and how similar. The Anunnaki, in their original context, are part of this. They are windows into how ancient peoples understood divinity, power, justice, creation, and the relationship between humans and the forces that govern existence. That is worth understanding on its own terms. The modern myths about the Anunnaki, while factually incorrect, are also worth understanding. They tell us about ourselves, about what we yearn for, about how we relate to the past and to authority, about the stories we tell to make sense of our place in the universe. Both the ancient and the modern have their place in the full picture. The ancient studied carefully and respectfully. The modern examined critically and understood psychologically and culturally. Mystery remains, but it is the right kind of mystery. The mystery that calls us to learn, to think, to engage, not the false mystery that leads us into fantasy. Your mind drifts now between thoughts. The boundary between waking and sleeping blurs. This is good. This is the purpose. Rest comes in its own time. Ren, Part 16. Lessons from the Anunnaki Story. What can we learn from this journey through ancient belief and modern reinterpretation? There are lessons here that extend beyond the specific question of whether the Anunnaki were gods or aliens. First, the importance of context. Nothing exists in isolation. Ancient texts were written in specific times, places, and cultures. They used language in particular ways. They assumed knowledge their audiences possessed. To understand them, we must reconstruct that context as best we can. Reading our own assumptions into ancient texts is a recipe for misunderstanding. When the Atrahasis epic describes gods creating humans from clay and divine blood, we must understand what clay meant to the Mesopotamians. Clay was the fundamental building material of their civilization. Their bricks were clay, their tablets were clay, their world was shaped from clay. So of course humans in their creation myths are formed from clay. It is symbolically appropriate to their culture. To read this as a primitive description of genetic engineering is to impose modern concepts where they do not belong. It strips the text of its cultural meaning and replaces it with something alien to the original authors. Second, the value of expertise. We cannot be experts in everything. Life is too short. Knowledge is too vast. We must rely on specialists who have devoted years to studying particular subjects. This is not blind faith in authority. It is practical recognition that deep understanding requires sustained effort. When Assyriologists who have spent decades learning ancient languages and studying ancient cultures tell us what texts mean, we should take their expertise seriously. They may be wrong about specifics, scholars debate and disagree, but they are operating from a foundation of knowledge that non-specialists lack. Dismissing expert consensus in favour of self-taught amateurs requires good reasons, not just preference for a more exciting narrative. And when virtually all experts in a field agree that alternative theories are wrong, that should carry significant weight. Third, the difference between open-mindedness and credulity. Being open-minded means being willing to consider evidence and change your views when evidence warrants it. It means not dismissing ideas simply because they are unfamiliar or challenge your assumptions. But open-mindedness is not the same as accepting any claim regardless of evidence. Critical thinking requires evaluating claims based on their support, their logical coherence, and their fit with established knowledge. A claim that contradicts vast amounts of well-established evidence needs extraordinary support, not just imaginative speculation. Ancient astronaut theories ask us to reject geology, astronomy, biology, archaeology, linguistics, and history. They ask us to believe that countless experts are wrong or deceiving us. That is an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence. The evidence offered does not meet that standard. Fourth, the danger of underestimating people. The assumption that ancient peoples could not have achieved what they did without outside help is insulting to those peoples. It denies their intelligence, creativity, and capability. It treats them as primitives needing a more advanced civilization to guide them. This attitude has roots in colonialism and racism. European colonizers often claimed that non-European peoples could not have built impressive monuments or developed sophisticated cultures without outside influence. These claims serve to justify colonization and exploitation. Modern ancient astronaut theories sometimes replicate this attitude. When they claim that Mesoamerican peoples could not have built their pyramids, or that Africans could not have developed metallurgy, or that Pacific Islanders could not have navigated the ocean, they echo colonialist assumptions about non-European peoples. We must reject these assumptions. Human intelligence and capability are constants across cultures and time. Ancient peoples were fully human, fully capable of remarkable achievements. Recognizing this is not just historically accurate, it is ethically necessary. Fifth, the importance of distinguishing different kinds of knowledge. Scientific knowledge, historical knowledge, and religious or philosophical knowledge are not the same. They ask different questions and use different methods. Science investigates the natural world through observation and experimentation. History investigates the past through evidence and interpretation. Religion and philosophy address questions of meaning, value, and ultimate reality. Ancient myths are not failed science. They are not primitive attempts to do what modern science does better. They are different kinds of discourse addressing different kinds of questions. The Enuma Elish is not a cosmology textbook that got the facts wrong. It is a theological and political statement about order, kingship, and divine power. Treating myths as if they were proto-scientific descriptions requiring updating with modern knowledge misunderstands what myths are and do. It impoverishes both the myths and our understanding of human culture. Sixth, the value of wonder rooted in reality. We do not need to invent alien interventions to find the past wondrous. Real human history is extraordinary enough. Consider the invention of agriculture. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans were hunter-gatherers. Then, in several places around the world, people began deliberately planting crops. This was not easy or obvious. It required observation of plant growth cycles, experimentation with selective breeding, development of new tools, and new forms of social organisation. The transition to agriculture transformed human existence. It enabled permanent settlements, population growth, social stratification, and eventually cities and civilizations. It was one of the most significant transitions in human history, and it was achieved through human intelligence and effort, not alien instruction. Or consider the development of writing. Sumerian cuneiform began as simple pictographs used for accounting. Over centuries, it evolved into a flexible system capable of expressing complex ideas, recording literature, and preserving information across generations. This was not a gift from advanced beings, it was innovation, gradual improvement, and cultural transmission. It shows humans solving problems, creating tools, and building on the work of previous generations. That is genuinely miraculous in its own right. Real history offers endless opportunities for wonder and admiration. We do not need to diminish it with false narratives. Seventh, the recognition that we tell stories to meet psychological needs. The popularity of ancient astronaut theories reveals something about contemporary anxieties and desires. We live in an age of rapid change and global challenges. Traditional sources of meaning and community have weakened for many people. The universe, as presented by modern science, can seem cold and impersonal. We yearn for significance, for connection to something greater, for assurance that we are not alone. Ancient astronaut theories offer a kind of cosmic reassurance. They suggest that humanity has always been part of a larger galactic community, that advanced beings have taken interest in us, that our existence has significance beyond our small planet. These are understandable desires, but we must be careful about how we satisfy them. Turning to false narratives that require rejecting evidence is not healthy. Better to find meaning in real connections with real people, in genuine understanding of the real universe, in authentic engagement with the human condition. Eighth, the ethical responsibility we bear toward the past. The people who lived in ancient Mesopotamia were real. They had hopes and fears, loves and losses, triumphs and tragedies. They created remarkable civilizations that shaped human history. They cannot speak for themselves now. We speak for them through how we interpret their remains, their texts, their monuments. That gives us a responsibility to represent them accurately and respectfully. Turning their gods into alien astronauts erases their actual beliefs and replaces them with modern fantasies. It treats their religious texts as raw material for our entertainment rather than as expressions of how they understood their world. We owe the past better than that. We owe it honest engagement, careful study, and respectful interpretation. Not because ancient peoples were perfect or beyond criticism, but because they were human and deserve the same consideration we would want for ourselves. Finally, the lesson of intellectual humility. We do not know everything. We will never know everything. There will always be mysteries and uncertainties. That is not a reason for despair or an excuse for wild speculation. It is simply the human condition. Being comfortable with uncertainty, with saying, "I don't know," with accepting that some questions may never be fully answered, these are marks of intellectual maturity. They free us from the need to have all the answers and allow us to appreciate the ongoing process of discovery and understanding. The story of the Anunnaki, both ancient and modern, teaches all these lessons if we are willing to learn them. It is a story about gods and civilization, about belief and speculation, about evidence and fantasy. It is a mirror reflecting both ancient Mesopotamia and contemporary culture. And now, let these lessons fade into the background. Let your thoughts become loose and unconnected. The night is deep and forgiving. Your body is heavy with rest. The ancient world recedes. The modern world recedes. Only this moment remains, and it is peaceful. Part 17. The Real Magic of Cuneiform. There is something genuinely magical about cuneiform writing, though it has nothing to do with aliens or advanced technology. The magic lies in what it represents. Human beings preserving their thoughts across millennia. Imagine holding a clay tablet pressed by hands 4,000 years ago. The person who made it lived and died long before recorded European history began, before Greece or Rome, before the biblical kingdoms. And yet their words survive. Cuneiform tablets are not rare. Hundreds of thousands exist in museum collections and archaeological sites. They contain the ordinary and the extraordinary, shopping lists alongside epic poetry, tax records alongside prayers, legal disputes alongside love letters. One tablet might record how much barley a temple received. Another might be a student's practice tablet filled with mistakes, showing someone learning to write generations before Homer. Another might be a letter from a worried mother to her travelling son. Another might be a king's boastful account of his victories. These tablets give us access to individual human lives. We can read a merchant's complaint about a shipment of inferior copper ore. We can see a mathematician working through geometric problems. We can find recipes for medicinal remedies. We can discover that a particular woman owned property and conducted business in her own name. The development of cuneiform itself is a story of human creativity. The earliest texts, from around 3,200 years before the Common Era, are simple pictographs. A picture of a head means head. A picture of a bowl means bowl. This is adequate for basic record keeping but limited. Over time, the system became more abstract. Symbols began representing sounds rather than just things. This phonetic development allowed cuneiform to express any word in the spoken language, not just concrete objects. It could capture grammar, tense, mood, and nuance. Different cultures adapted cuneiform to their languages. The Akkadians used it for their Semitic language, quite different from Sumerian. The Hittites adapted it for their Indo-European language. The Elamites used it. The Persians developed a simplified version. Cuneiform became an international script, the common written language of diplomacy and trade across the ancient Near East. The wedge-shaped marks that give cuneiform its name, the Latin word cunus means wedge, were created by pressing a reed stylus into soft clay at different angles. The technique required skill. Professional scribes trained for years. Their work was valued and respected. Scribes were not at the top of the social hierarchy, but they were essential. Kings needed scribes to record laws and treaties. Temples needed scribes to maintain records. Merchants needed scribes to document transactions. The growth of complex civilization depended on writing, and writing depended on trained scribes. We know the names of some scribes. We know that women as well as men could be scribes, though it was less common. We know that scribal families sometimes passed the profession down through generations. We know that scribes took pride in their work, sometimes adding notes, identifying themselves, or commenting on the text they were copying. The survival of cuneiform tablets is largely due to chance and circumstance. Clay is durable, especially when baked. Many tablets were baked deliberately for permanence. Others were baked accidentally when buildings burned. Fire that destroyed cities inadvertently preserved their archives. But many tablets were not baked. They were simply sun-dried. These are more fragile and dissolve in water. Countless tablets have been lost to time and weather. What survives is a fraction of what once existed, and yet even this fraction gives us an extraordinary window into the ancient world. The decipherment of cuneiform is its own fascinating story. By the 19th century of the Common Era, scholars knew cuneiform existed, but they could not read it. The Bestun inscription in Persia, carved on a cliff face, provided the breakthrough. It contained the same text in 3 languages: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. Henry Rawlinson, a British Army officer, copied the inscription at considerable personal risk, dangling on ropes over a precipice. Working with the copies, he and other scholars gradually deciphered the scripts. Old Persian, related to known languages, was cracked first. This provided the key to the Babylonian, which in turn opened the door to understanding Akkadian and eventually Sumerian. The decipherment process was painstaking. False starts and dead ends were common. Scholars argued over interpretations, but gradually the ancient languages yielded their secrets. By the late 19th century, Assyriology had become an established field. Today we can read cuneiform with high confidence. Dictionaries and grammars exist. The languages are well understood, though rare words and unusual constructions still challenge translators. New texts continue to refine our understanding. And what do these texts tell us? They tell us about daily life in a way that monumental inscriptions and religious texts do not. We learn what people ate, how they dressed, what they paid for goods, how they settled disputes, how they expressed affection or anger. One famous text is a complaint letter, possibly the oldest complaint letter in history. A merchant named Nani wrote to a copper supplier named Ea Nasir, complaining about receiving inferior quality copper ore and poor customer service. The letter is direct and indignant. Eanasir apparently kept it in his house, along with other complaints. Perhaps he was a difficult merchant, or perhaps he saved them as a record of disputes. Either way, across 4,000 years we can feel Nanny's frustration. Another text is a love poem, probably sung as part of a sacred marriage ritual between a king and a priestess representing Inanna, goddess of love. The poem is tender and erotic, celebrating physical beauty and desire. It reminds us that ancient peoples felt the same emotions we do, desired the same intimacies, celebrated love and attraction. Medical texts show ancient attempts to understand and treat illness. The approach was a mixture of what we would call medicine and magic. Remedies combined herbs and minerals with incantations. Some treatments likely had genuine efficacy. Others were based on misunderstandings of anatomy and disease. But the impulse to heal, to relieve suffering, to preserve life, that is universal and timeless. Mathematical texts reveal sophisticated understanding. The Mesopotamians used a base 60 system, which we still see in our division of hours into 60 minutes and circles into 360 degrees. They solved complex algebraic problems. They calculated areas and volumes. They understood principles we would recognize as early geometry and number theory. Astronomical texts show centuries of careful observation. The Mesopotamians tracked planetary movements, predicted lunar eclipses and understood astronomical cycles. Their observations were remarkably accurate given their tools. Later, Greek astronomy built on Mesopotamian foundations. Legal texts give us insight into social structures and values. The Code of Hammurabi, inscribed on a stone stele, contains nearly 300 laws covering everything from property rights to family relations to criminal penalties. The laws are not always just by modern standards. They include different penalties based on social class, but they represent an attempt to establish order and predictability in social relations. The Epic of Gilgamesh, in its various versions, shows literary sophistication. The epic uses poetic devices, develops characters, explores themes. It is not primitive or crude. It is literature in the full sense, capable of moving readers across vast spans of time. All of this comes to us through cuneiform, through wedge-shaped marks in clay, through the work of ancient scribes who pressed reeds into soft tablets and thereby captured their world for posterity. This is the real magic, not aliens or advanced technology, but human beings creating a system to preserve thought and information. Writing is one of humanity's greatest inventions, and cuneiform is one of writing's earliest forms. Every cuneiform tablet is a message from the past, not a mysterious and coded secret, but a human voice speaking across the ages. I existed, I thought, I felt, I mattered, and because of writing, because of clay and reeds and the determination to record, we can still hear those voices. That should fill us with wonder, that should make us pause in admiration. Ancient peoples, with no model to follow, invented writing. They preserved their thoughts. They gave us the gift of their voices. We can still hear them if we listen. Let this wonder settle over you like a soft blanket. The weight of history, the presence of the past, the continuity of human experience. All preserved in clay, all waiting to be read, all speaking to us still. Your breathing is slow and deep now. The details fade. Only the sense remains, the sense of connection across time. The ancient scribes have done their work. They have preserved what they could, and we, in this moment, receive their gift. Part 18. Religion and Meaning. What did religion mean to the ancient Mesopotamians? This question is worth exploring because it reveals something fundamental about human nature and our need for meaning. For the Mesopotamians, religion was not separate from life. It was woven into every aspect of existence. There was no word in their languages that corresponds exactly to our word, religion. The division we make between sacred and secular would have been foreign to them. The gods were real. Not metaphorically, not abstractly, but really real. They existed, they acted, they affected the world. To question their existence would have been absurd, like questioning whether the sun rises or whether water is wet. The gods were simply part of reality. But the relationship between humans and gods was complex. The gods were not all-powerful or all-knowing. They were stronger and longer-lived than humans, but they had limitations. They made mistakes. They changed their minds. They argued with each other. In many ways, the gods mirrored human society. There were hierarchies among them. There were conflicts and alliances. There were family relationships and rivalries. This anthropomorphism makes sense. Humans understand the world through human categories. Of course, our conceptions of divinity reflect our social structures, but the gods also represented forces beyond human control. Enlil, the storm god, could send devastating floods. Shamash, the sun god, brought light and justice. Ishtar, goddess of love and war, could inspire passion or bloodshed. These were not just personified natural phenomena, they were divine beings with agency and will, but their domains connected them to aspects of existence that humans experienced but could not control. Prayer and ritual were attempts to maintain good relations with the gods. Offerings ensured divine favour. Festivals honoured the gods and reinforced social bonds. Temple service provided for the gods' needs, and, by extension, the community's needs. This might seem transactional to modern sensibilities, but it reflected a worldview where reciprocity governed relationships. Humans served the gods through worship and offerings. The gods in return provided protection, prosperity, and order. It was a covenant, a mutual relationship with obligations on both sides. When things went wrong, when crops failed, when enemies attacked, when disease struck, this was understood as divine displeasure or the result of conflicts among the gods. Divination attempted to determine what had gone wrong and how to set it right. Were the offerings insufficient? Had a ritual been performed incorrectly? Had someone offended a god? This system placed a heavy burden on humans. If disaster struck, it might be your fault. You or your community had somehow failed in religious obligations. This could lead to anxiety and scapegoating, but it also provided a framework for understanding suffering and a path for addressing it. Modern readers sometimes criticize ancient religions as superstitious or primitive, but this is uncharitable. The Mesopotamians were doing what all humans do, trying to make sense of existence, to find meaning in their experiences, to exercise some control in an uncertain world. Their methods were different from ours, their explanations were different. But the underlying impulses are the same. We still seek meaning. We still try to understand why bad things happen. We still create narratives to make sense of our lives. The Mesopotamian gods also served moral and social functions. Shamash was the god of justice. He saw all human actions. He rewarded the righteous and punished the wicked. This divine surveillance provided motivation for moral behaviour even when human witnesses were absent. Laws were presented as divinely sanctioned. To break a law was not just to violate human rules, but to offend divine order. This gave laws stronger force and legitimacy. It also meant that justice was not just a human concern, but a cosmic one. The gods also provided explanations for social hierarchies. Kings ruled by divine right. Priests mediated between humans and gods because the gods had established that relationship. Social order reflected divine order. This could be used to justify inequalities and oppression, as it has been in many religious systems, but it also created expectations of rulers. A king who failed to maintain justice and prosperity risked losing divine favour. The afterlife in Mesopotamian belief was not a place of reward or punishment, in the way later religious traditions would conceive it. The underworld was simply where the dead went. It was dark and dusty, a shadow existence. All people, regardless of virtue or vice, ended up there. This might seem bleak compared to religions that promise heavenly rewards for the righteous. But it had its own logic. It placed the emphasis on this life, on living well and achieving what one could before death. It also meant that the gods' justice operated in this world through prosperity or suffering, not in an afterlife. Some individuals achieved a kind of immortality through fame and legacy. Kings who built great monuments, scribes who composed enduring literature, heroes who became legendary, these lived on in memory and story. But ordinary people simply returned to the earth, their names forgotten. This was not seen as tragic. It was simply the way things were. Death was the common fate of humanity, and accepting that was part of wisdom. The Epic of Gilgamesh explores this theme. Gilgamesh seeks immortality but cannot achieve it. He must learn to accept mortality and find meaning in mortal life. What did the Anunnaki specifically mean within this religious system? They were part of the divine hierarchy, associated with earthly and underworld domains. They decreed fates and judged the dead. They were invoked in certain rituals and mentioned in certain texts. but they were not the sole or even the primary focus of religious life. Individual gods like Enlil, Enki, Inanna, and Marduk received more attention in worship and literature. The Anunnaki as a collective were part of the theological framework, but not usually the direct object of devotion. When the Mesopotamians prayed, they prayed to specific gods for specific purposes. A farmer might pray to the agricultural deities for good crops. A merchant might pray to a god associated with trade. A sick person might pray to a healing deity. A king might pray to Marduk or Asher for victory in war. The religion was practical and this worldly. It focused on maintaining cosmic order, securing divine favour, and navigating the uncertainties of life. It provided meaning, community, ethical guidance and explanations for both fortune and misfortune. It was not perfect. No human system is. But it served the needs of millions of people across thousands of years. It helped them make sense of their world and their place in it. It gave structure and significance to their lives. To reduce this to a misunderstood encounter with extraterrestrials is to miss all of this richness. It is to see the Mesopotamians as confused and primitive rather than as fully human, grappling with the same fundamental questions we still face. What is the meaning of life? Why do we suffer? What happens after death? How should we live? These questions do not have easy answers. Ancient peoples developed religious systems to address them. Modern peoples do the same, whether through traditional religion, secular philosophy, or other frameworks. The Anunnaki, in their original context, were part of the Mesopotamian answer to these questions. They were divine beings in a complex cosmos, contributing to the order and meaning of existence. That is what they meant to the people who believed in them. Understanding this does not require belief in the gods. It requires empathy and imagination. It requires seeing ancient peoples as our fellow humans, different in culture but not in fundamental nature. It requires respecting their beliefs even as we analyse and study them. Let these thoughts drift now. Let the questions remain but the need to answer them fade. The ancient Mesopotamians found their meanings. You will find yours. But for now, there is only rest, only the gentle darkness, only peace. Part 19. The power of stories. Stories shape how we understand the world. They organise experience into narratives with beginnings, middles and ends. They identify characters, motivations, conflicts and resolutions. They provide frameworks for interpreting events. The Mesopotamians knew this. Their myths were stories that explained fundamental realities. Why do humans exist? The gods needed servants. Why do we die? Death is the common human fate decreed by the gods. Why do bad things happen? The gods are displeased, or they are in conflict. These stories were not scientific explanations, but they served important functions. They made existence comprehensible. They connected individual lives to larger cosmic narratives. They reinforced social values and structures. Modern people also use stories to understand the world. We tell ourselves stories about progress, about history having direction and purpose. We tell stories about our personal lives, identifying key moments and turning points. We tell stories about our societies, about who we are and where we came from. The ancient astronaut narrative is a modern story. Like all stories, it has characters. The Anunnaki, ancient humans, modern discoverers of hidden truths. It has conflict between those who know the truth and those who deny it. It has a plot. Advanced beings visited Earth, influenced human development, and left traces that we can discover. This story serves certain functions for those who believe it. It provides meaning. It offers the excitement of hidden knowledge. It creates community among believers. It provides a framework for interpreting ancient evidence. But unlike the original Mesopotamian myths, which made no claim to be literal history, the ancient astronaut story presents itself as factual. Its proponents claim they have discovered historical truth that scholars deny or ignore. This matters because it affects how we relate to evidence. If you believe the Anunnaki were literally aliens, you interpret ancient texts and artifacts through that lens. Anything ambiguous becomes support for the theory. Anything that contradicts it must be explained away. This is how conspiracy theories work generally. They create self-reinforcing narratives where everything confirms the theory. Evidence against the theory is dismissed as part of the cover-up. Lack of evidence for the theory proves how well the truth has been hidden. Breaking free from such narratives is difficult because it requires abandoning the story, not just individual claims. The story provides meaning and structure. Giving it up leaves a void that must be filled with something else. This is why simply presenting contrary evidence often fails to change minds. You're not just challenging facts. You're challenging a narrative that has become central to someone's understanding of the world. More effective is offering alternative stories that satisfy similar needs. The real story of human civilization, told compellingly, can provide wonder, meaning, and significance without requiring false claims. Consider the story of human migration. Modern humans evolved in Africa. Over tens of thousands of years they spread across the globe. They crossed deserts and mountains. They reached islands and continents. They adapted to every environment from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest. This migration was not a single planned expedition. It was countless small movements, groups splitting off, settling new areas, sometimes moving on, sometimes staying. Over generations, humans covered the entire habitable world, and everywhere they went they adapted and innovated. They developed tools suited to local conditions, they created new languages, they invented new technologies, they formed new societies. The diversity of human cultures is the result of this migration and adaptation. This is genuinely extraordinary. From African origins, humanity became a global species through nothing more than human movement, adaptation, and innovation. No aliens required, just human curiosity, courage, and ingenuity. Or consider the story of how humans learned to work metal. Someone, somewhere, noticed that certain rocks in a fire changed, becoming soft and malleable. Someone experimented with this, learning to shape the softened material. Someone discovered that adding other materials created stronger or more workable metals. This knowledge spread through trade and cultural contact. It was refined and improved over generations, from simple copper to bronze to iron to steel. Each step built on previous knowledge. Each innovation opened new possibilities. This process took thousands of years. It involved countless unknown individuals making small discoveries and improvements. The cumulative effect was transformative, enabling new tools, new weapons, new art, new possibilities. That story is powerful because it is true. It shows human capability and persistence. It connects us to our ancestors through the long thread of technological development. It needs no embellishment to be amazing. Or consider the story of mathematical discovery. The Mesopotamians discovered the Pythagorean theorem more than 1,000 years before Pythagoras. They understood principles of geometry and algebra. They could calculate areas and volumes. They worked with fractions and place values. All of this was human discovery. People observing patterns, testing ideas, recording results, teaching others. Mathematical knowledge accumulated because people were curious about numbers and shapes, because that knowledge had practical applications, and because teachers passed it to students who then made their own contributions. Mathematics feels almost magical. That pure reason can discover eternal truths, that patterns in numbers reflect patterns in reality, that logical proofs can establish certainty. And this magic was discovered by humans, gradually, through intellectual effort. Stories of human achievement, when told well, inspire and amaze. They connect us to our shared history. They show what humans are capable of when we work together across generations. They dignify our ancestors by recognizing their accomplishments. These stories do not require ancient astronauts. They are better without them. The Anunnaki as gods in ancient Mesopotamian religion are part of these human stories. They show how one culture understood divinity and meaning. They reveal ancient theological and philosophical thought. The Anunnaki as modern aliens are a different kind of story, one that denies human capability and imposes modern frameworks on ancient cultures. It is a less interesting story and a less true one, but stories have power regardless of truth. That is why false stories can spread and persist. They fulfill needs, they create meaning, they build communities. The challenge is to tell true stories that fulfill those same needs, to show that reality is wonderful enough, to make history engaging and accessible, to help people connect with our shared human past in authentic ways. This requires skill. Academic writing is often not narrative. It is analytical, cautious, hedged with qualifications. Important work, but not always engaging for general readers. Good popular history finds the story in the scholarship. It creates narrative tension. It develops characters even when those characters are entire civilizations. It makes readers care about what happened and why. Some historians and science communicators excel at this. They bring the past to life without sacrificing accuracy. They show that history is full of drama, conflict, ingenuity, and human interest. They make learning feel like discovery. The story of the Anunnaki, both the ancient story and the modern one, can be told in ways that engage without deceiving, that acknowledge why people find ancient astronaut theories appealing while explaining why they are wrong, that honour ancient Mesopotamian beliefs while making them accessible to modern audiences. That is what this documentary attempts, to tell the full story, to acknowledge the appeal of alternative narratives while presenting the evidence clearly, to treat the subject with the nuance it deserves. Stories matter. They shape belief and understanding. They can enlighten or deceive. They can honour or distort. Choosing which stories to tell and how to tell them is an ethical act with real consequences. The Mesopotamians told their stories in cuneiform on clay tablets. We tell ours in books, films, documentaries, and digital media. The medium changes, but the human need for story remains constant. What stories we tell about the past affects how we understand ourselves. If we tell stories that deny human capability, we diminish ourselves. If we tell stories that honour human achievement, we recognise our potential. The true story of the Anunnaki honours the ancient Mesopotamians who created and believed in these gods. It recognises their sophistication and creativity. It treats their religious thought with respect. The false story erases their voices and replaces them with modern fantasies. It serves contemporary needs at the expense of historical truth. We can do better. We can tell stories that are both true and meaningful. Stories that inspire wonder while respecting evidence. Stories that connect us authentically to our human past. Let these stories blend now into the fabric of night. Let the need to hold on to them fade. Stories flow like rivers. They rise and fall like breath. They come and go like the tide. For now, there is only the gentle current carrying you towards sleep. Part 20. Science and Wonder. Does accepting scientific and historical evidence mean giving up wonder? Must we choose between magic and truth? These questions lie at the heart of why alternative histories persist. For some people, the universe described by science feels cold and mechanical. Stars are just balls of burning gas. Planets are just rocks and ice. Life emerged through random mutation and natural selection. Consciousness is just neurons firing. Where is the wonder in that? But this perception misunderstands what science actually reveals. The universe that science describes is far more wondrous than any myth, precisely because it is real, and not because it requires denying evidence or rejecting reason. Consider stars. Yes, they are burning gas, but what does that mean? Stars are fusion reactors where hydrogen atoms combine under immense pressure and heat to form helium, releasing energy in the process. This energy radiates across space, warming planets, enabling life. Every atom in your body heavier than hydrogen was forged in a star. The carbon in your cells, the calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, all were created in stellar cores or in the supernova explosions of dying stars. You are literally made of stardust. That is not a metaphor. It is not poetry. It is literal truth. The atoms that compose you existed in stars that lived and died billions of years ago. Those atoms were scattered through space and eventually came together in the gas cloud that formed our solar system. Some ended up on Earth. Some became part of living things. Some became you. This connection to the cosmos is more profound than any ancient astronaut theory offers. You're not just related to aliens. You are part of the universe itself. You are the universe becoming aware of itself. Or consider evolution. The idea that life emerged through natural processes, through random mutation and natural selection, without conscious design or direction, this strikes some people as reducing life to meaningless mechanism. But look at what evolution actually achieves. From simple, self-replicating molecules over billions of years, the process of variation and selection produced the vast diversity of life we see today, from bacteria to blue whales, from mosses to sequoia trees, from sponges to humans. The complexity of a single cell is staggering. The molecular machinery that copies DNA, synthesizes proteins, generates energy, maintains boundaries, responds to signals, this is more sophisticated than any human technology. And this complexity evolved through natural processes over deep time. The human brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others, forming trillions of synapses. This biological computer, evolved through natural selection, enables consciousness, language, abstract thought, art, music, mathematics, love, and wonder itself. Evolution produced you. Not through divine intervention, not through alien engineering, but through the patient, blind process of mutation and selection over 4 billion years. You are the descendant of an unbroken line of successful reproducers stretching back to the origin of life. Every organism alive today, from the bacterium to the human, is equally evolved. We are all survivors of the same lengthy process. We are all cousins in the deep family tree of life. We share genes with mushrooms, with trees, with insects, with whales. All life on Earth is related because all life shares a common ancestor. This unity of life, revealed by genetics and evolutionary biology, is genuinely profound. It connects all living things in a web of kinship across deep time. It means that the impulse to care for other species is not just sentiment, but recognition of actual relationship. Or consider the age and scale of the universe. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. Our Sun is about 4.6 billion years old. Earth is approximately the same age. Life on Earth is nearly 4 billion years old. Modern humans have existed for perhaps 300,000 years. These numbers are difficult to grasp. If the history of the universe were compressed into a single year, with the Big Bang happening on January 1st at midnight, our Sun and Earth would not form until September. Life would appear in late September. Complex multicellular life would not emerge until mid-November. Dinosaurs would appear and go extinct in late December. Modern humans would appear at 11:58 p.m. on December 31st. All of recorded human history would occur in the final seconds before midnight. We are latecomers to an ancient universe, and the scale is equally staggering. The observable universe is about 93 billion light-years in diameter. It contains hundreds of billions of galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars. The number of stars in the universe likely exceeds the number of grains of sand on all of Earth's beaches. And in all that vastness, as far as we know, only on this small planet orbiting an ordinary star in an unremarkable galaxy has life emerged and evolved into beings capable of understanding the universe itself. We might not be alone. The universe is vast and ancient. Other life probably exists somewhere, but we have not found it yet. We do not know if intelligent life is common or rare. We do not know if civilizations are short-lived or enduring. We are still searching, still wondering. This uncertainty is part of the wonder. We do not know what is out there. We are genuinely exploring. Every new exoplanet discovered, every new data point about conditions for life, every refinement of our understanding brings us closer to answering one of humanity's oldest questions: are we alone? But whether we are alone or not, the universe is magnificent. Galaxies spiral. Stars are born and die. Black holes warp space and time. Quantum mechanics reveals that reality at the smallest scales behaves in ways that defy common sense. Relativity shows that space and time are not absolute but relative and interconnected. The universe is stranger and more wonderful than ancient peoples imagined, not because they lacked imagination, but because the tools to discover these truths did not yet exist. They created myths that made sense of what they could observe. We have tools that let us observe further and deeper. Science extends human perception. Telescopes let us see distant galaxies. Microscopes reveal cellular machinery. Particle accelerators probe the fundamental structure of matter. DNA sequencing reads the genetic code. Each tool reveals layers of reality previously hidden, and what they reveal is extraordinary. Not because it confirms our expectations or flatters our significance, but because reality itself is more creative and vast than human imagination alone could produce. The wonder of science is not in providing comfortable answers. It is in revealing a universe that challenges us, that exceeds our grasp, that remains mysterious even as we understand more and more. Dark matter and dark energy make up most of the universe, and we do not understand what they are. Consciousness emerges from neurons, but we do not fully understand how. Life began on Earth, but we do not know the exact path from chemistry to biology. Quantum mechanics makes accurate predictions, but interpreting what it means about reality remains debated. Science does not answer all questions. It reveals how much we do not know. Every answer generates new questions. Every discovery opens new mysteries. This ongoing process of discovery is part of the wonder. The ancient Mesopotamians looked at the night sky and saw the gods. We look at the same sky and see galaxies and nebulae and the cosmic microwave background radiation from the Big Bang. Both visions involve wonder. Both involve humans trying to comprehend something vast and mysterious. The difference is that our vision is constrained by evidence. We cannot simply imagine what we like. We must observe, measure, test, and revise. This constraint is not a limitation on wonder. It is what makes the wonder real. When we discover something true about the universe, that truth is shared. It is not private or subjective. It is part of the objective structure of reality, and that makes it more wonderful, not less. We are not just imagining significance. We are discovering actual patterns in actual reality. The Mesopotamians did not have our tools or our knowledge, but they had the same capacity for wonder, the same desire to understand, the same drive to find meaning. If they could have seen what we see, learned what we know, they would have been amazed. We do not honour them by pretending they encountered aliens. We honour them by recognising their genuine achievements and their genuine limitations. They were at the beginning of humanity's long journey of discovery. We are further along that path, but still far from the end. The journey itself is the wonder. Each generation learns more, sees further, understands better. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before. The Mesopotamians contributed to this journey. Their inventions, their observations, their ideas became part of the foundation on which later knowledge was built. Science and wonder are not opposites. Science is organised wonder. It is disciplined curiosity. It is wonder that actually discovers truths instead of just imagining them. And history, studied carefully and honestly, reveals the wonder of human achievement. How we came to be what we are. How we developed language and culture and technology and art. How we spread across the planet and built civilizations. How we began to understand the cosmos and our place in it. This real history is more inspiring than alternative histories that deny human capability. It shows what we actually achieved, with all our limitations and mistakes and triumphs. The Anunnaki, as part of this real history, were gods imagined by creative, thoughtful people grappling with existence. They were part of humanity's long exploration of meaning and divinity. They deserve to be understood in that context, not transformed into something they never were. Wonder is not diminished by truth. It is enhanced. Reality, when we understand it clearly, is more wonderful than fantasy. We do not need to invent alien interventions. The real universe is extraordinary enough. Let this wonder settle gently over you. The universe is vast. Time is deep. Life is complex. Consciousness is mysterious. And you are part of it all. You are the universe experiencing itself. You are billions of years of cosmic evolution becoming aware. That is the real magic. Not ancient astronauts, but the genuine mystery and beauty of existence. Not aliens creating humans, but the universe itself producing, through natural processes, beings capable of understanding the universe. Let your mind expand to hold this vastness, then contract back to the simplicity of this moment. Breathing in, breathing out. The universe is vast, but this moment is intimate and immediate. You exist. You are aware. And for now, that is enough. Part 21. The Future of the Past. What does the future hold for our understanding of ancient Mesopotamia? How will the story of the Anunnaki continue to evolve? These questions remain open. Archaeological work continues. New sites are excavated. New tablets are translated. Technologies like satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar reveal previously unknown structures. Every year brings new discoveries that refine our understanding. Some sites remain dangerous to access due to conflict in the region. Iraq, Syria, and other areas where Mesopotamian cities stood have experienced war and instability. Archaeological sites have been damaged or destroyed. Artifacts have been looted. This is a genuine tragedy. A loss not just for scholarship but for human heritage. When the National Museum in Baghdad was looted during the Iraq War, thousands of artifacts were stolen. Many were recovered, but many remain missing. These objects are not just valuable commodities. They are irreplaceable pieces of human history. Their loss diminishes our ability to understand the past. Climate change also threatens archaeological sites. Rising sea levels, changing weather patterns, increased erosion all put ancient sites at risk. Preservation requires resources and stability, both of which can be scarce in regions experiencing conflict or economic hardship. But work continues where possible. International teams collaborate with local archaeologists. Museums work to preserve collections and make them accessible. Digital archives preserve images and data even when physical sites are threatened. New technologies enable new kinds of analysis. Chemical analysis of residues on pottery reveals what foods were stored or cooked. DNA analysis of ancient remains reveals population movements and relationships. Isotope analysis of teeth shows where individuals grew up based on the water they drank as children. These techniques extract information from artifacts in ways previous generations could not. A single clay tablet can now be analysed to determine not just what it says, but when and where the clay came from, how it was prepared, even sometimes identifying individual scribes by their handwriting and linguistic choices. 3D scanning and printing allow precise replicas of fragile artifacts to be created and shared. Researchers around the world can study copies of tablets without risking damage to originals. Virtual reality reconstructions let us walk through ancient cities as they might have looked. Computational analysis of texts enables new kinds of research. Large corpora of cuneiform tablets can be searched for patterns. Linguistic changes over time can be tracked quantitatively. Networks of trade and correspondence can be mapped. All of this means our understanding of ancient Mesopotamia will continue to deepen. Details will be corrected. New insights will emerge. The picture will become richer and more complex. But certain fundamentals are unlikely to change. The Anunnaki were gods, not aliens. Writing was invented by humans, not taught by extraterrestrials. Civilizations arose through human effort, not outside intervention. These conclusions are based on massive amounts of converging evidence from multiple disciplines. Future discoveries might surprise us in many ways. We might find texts that change our understanding of particular events or ideas. We might discover new cities or new artifacts that expand our knowledge. But we will not find evidence that validates ancient astronaut theories, because those theories do not describe reality. The popularity of alternative histories may continue, evolve, or fade. New versions will likely appear, adapting to contemporary concerns and technologies. Perhaps future alternative histories will incorporate artificial intelligence or genetic engineering in new ways. The specific claims will change, but the underlying impulse, to find simple dramatic explanations for complex histories, will probably persist. Education remains crucial, helping people develop critical thinking skills, teaching them to evaluate sources and claims, making actual history accessible and engaging. These are long-term projects with no quick solutions. The internet has democratized information, but also made it harder to distinguish reliable from unreliable sources. A polished website promoting ancient astronaut theories can look as credible as a university archaeology department's site. Determining which to trust requires skills that not everyone has developed. Media literacy, scientific literacy, historical literacy, these are essential skills for navigating the modern information environment. Schools and other institutions that foster these literacies serve society well. But developing these skills is challenging and ongoing work. The story of the Anunnaki will continue to be told in multiple versions. The scholarly version, based on careful study of ancient texts and archaeological evidence. The alternative version, promoted in popular media and online. And probably other versions too, as different groups appropriate the story for their own purposes. Which version becomes dominant in popular consciousness depends partly on which is told more compellingly and which reaches more people. Truth does not automatically prevail. It must be advocated for, explained, and made accessible. Scholars increasingly recognize the need to engage with public audiences, not to talk down to them, but to share knowledge in accessible ways, to explain why evidence matters and how we know what we know, to show that real history is fascinating and worth understanding. Some scholars use social media effectively. They answer questions, debunk myths, share interesting facts, and engage in discussions. They humanize scholarship and make themselves accessible. This bridges the gap between academic and public worlds. Museums continue to play important roles. When people can see actual artifacts, touch replicas, walk through reconstructed spaces, history becomes tangible and immediate. Good museum exhibits combine artifacts with narrative and context, helping visitors understand what they are seeing. Documentaries and podcasts can reach wide audiences if done well. Some prioritize entertainment over accuracy, contributing to confusion, but others demonstrate that accurate history can be compelling. The challenge is creating content that is both factually rigorous and engaging to watch or hear. The future of our understanding of ancient Mesopotamia depends on continued research, preservation of sites and artifacts, education, and effective communication. It requires resources, institutional support, and public interest. It requires balancing specialization with accessibility, and it requires humility, recognizing that we do not know everything and probably never will, that our interpretations might need revision, that future scholars may see things we miss. This intellectual humility is compatible with confidence in what we do know. Evidence-based conclusions are reliable even if not perfect. The Anunnaki, in their original form, will continue to fascinate scholars of ancient religion. They reveal aspects of how Mesopotamians understood divinity and cosmic order. They appear in texts that illuminate ancient thought and culture. They are worth studying for what they actually were, not what modern myths have made them. The modern Anunnaki myth will probably also persist, at least for a while. It serves psychological and social functions for those who believe it. Changing deeply held beliefs is difficult, and often requires more than just presenting evidence. But perhaps, over time, as more people encounter accurate information about ancient Mesopotamia, as education improves, as critical thinking becomes more widespread, the alternative narratives will lose their hold. This is optimistic, but not impossible. The past cannot be changed, but our understanding of it can evolve. The ancient Mesopotamians lived their lives, created their civilizations, and believed their beliefs. Those historical facts are fixed, but what we make of them, how we interpret them, what we learn from them, these remain open. The future of the past is in our hands. How we study it, teach it, preserve it, and think about it will shape what future generations know and understand. That is a responsibility worth taking seriously. For now, let thoughts of the future fade. The present moment is enough. Your breathing continues, steady and slow. The night holds you gently. Past and future both recede. Only now remains, peaceful and still. Part 22. Personal reflection and closure. We have travelled far together through this night, from ancient Sumer to modern debates, from clay tablets to television shows, from gods to aliens and back to gods again. The journey has been long and winding, but perhaps it has served its purpose. If you are still awake, still listening, consider what has resonated with you. What have you learned? What has challenged your assumptions? What questions remain? If you have drifted into sleep, then this documentary has fulfilled its primary purpose. The words have carried you into rest, and the ancient Mesopotamians, in their way, have helped ease you into peaceful slumber. The story of the Anunnaki is ultimately about how we understand the past and ourselves. It is about the difference between what we want to believe and what evidence supports. It is about respecting ancient peoples while recognizing our own needs and limitations. The ancient Mesopotamians were remarkable. They invented writing, they developed mathematics and astronomy, they created literature that still moves readers today. They built cities and established laws. They asked profound questions about existence and meaning. They did all this without outside help, without alien intervention, through human intelligence, creativity, and collaboration. That makes their achievements more impressive, not less. Their gods, including the Anunnaki, were expressions of how they understood reality. These deities were not primitive science. They were sophisticated theology. They addressed questions that science cannot answer, questions about meaning and purpose and value. The modern transformation of the Anunnaki into aliens reflects our contemporary concerns and fascinations. It shows our ambivalence about human capability, our desire for cosmic significance, our complicated relationship with authority and expertise. Understanding why ancient astronaut theories are appealing helps us understand ourselves. We want wonder, we want meaning, we want to be part of something larger. These are healthy human desires. The question is how we satisfy them. False narratives that require rejecting evidence are not satisfying in any deep sense. They provide temporary excitement, but not genuine understanding. They create communities based on shared beliefs that happen to be wrong. True narratives, grounded in evidence and honestly grappling with uncertainty, offer more lasting satisfaction. They connect us authentically to reality. They show us the universe as it actually is, in all its complexity and mystery. They honour both the past and the present. The ancient Mesopotamians cannot speak for themselves anymore. We speak for them through how we interpret and present their remains. This gives us responsibility. We should strive to understand them accurately, not to use them for our own purposes. At the same time, we cannot help but see the past through our own perspectives. Complete objectivity is impossible. We bring our own questions, assumptions, and biases. The best we can do is be aware of this and try to minimize distortion. Studying the past is ultimately about understanding humanity, how humans have lived, thought, created, and believed across different times and places. This understanding enriches us. It shows us possibilities we might not otherwise imagine. It reveals the diversity and unity of human experience. The Anunnaki story in all its versions is part of this human story. The ancient gods reveal Mesopotamian religious thought. The modern myth reveals contemporary psychology and culture. Both are worth understanding, but in different ways and for different reasons. As this documentary draws to a close, perhaps the most important message is this: be curious, be critical, be humble. Curious about the world and its history, critical in evaluating claims and sources, humble about the limits of your knowledge and understanding. These qualities enable genuine learning. They protect against false certainty while allowing for confidence in what evidence supports. They balance openness to new ideas with skepticism of unsupported claims. The universe is vast and mysterious. Human history is complex and fascinating. There is more to learn than any one person could ever master. But each of us can learn something. Each of us can develop our understanding. Each of us can appreciate both what we know and what remains unknown. The ancient Mesopotamians looked up at the stars and imagined gods. We look up and see galaxies and cosmic history. Both gazes involve wonder. Both involve humans trying to comprehend something greater than themselves. We are connected to those ancient peoples through time and shared humanity. We face many of the same fundamental questions. We have different tools and knowledge, but the same capacity for curiosity, creativity, and meaning-making. Honouring that connection means understanding them truly, not transforming them into something they were not. It means recognising their achievements and their limitations. It means seeing them as our fellow humans, different but not alien, distant but not incomprehensible. The Anunnaki were gods. They were part of humanity's long exploration of divinity and meaning. They served religious, social, and psychological functions in ancient Mesopotamian society. They were important to millions of people across thousands of years. That is their true story. It is not as dramatic as ancient astronauts, but it is real, and reality, understood clearly and deeply, offers its own profound satisfactions. As the night deepens and this long journey ends, let yourself rest in that reality. The universe is vast. Time is deep. Humanity is old and resilient. You are part of all of it. Connected to ancient Mesopotamia through the long chain of human history. Connected to the cosmos through the atoms in your body. You are a conscious being in a universe that produces consciousness. You are matter that has arranged itself to contemplate matter. You are the universe knowing itself. That is the real wonder. Not ancient astronauts, but this. Existence itself. Consciousness itself. The improbable fact that you exist and can think about your existence. Rest now in that wonder. Let the details fade. Let the debates and theories dissolve. Let even the ancient world recede into comfortable distance. There is only this moment, this breath, this peaceful darkness, this gentle transition from waking to sleep. The Anunnaki, whether as gods or as myths, have served their purpose for tonight. They have carried you through hours of darkness. They have given your mind something to follow, a thread leading from waking consciousness into the realm of sleep. And now, whether you sleep or simply rest, whether you remember these words or forget them, whether you're convinced or still questioning, all is well. The ancient rivers still flow, at least in imagination. The clay tablets still wait in museums. The cuneiform signs still carry their ancient messages. The past remains, knowable in part, mysterious in part, always there to explore for those willing to make the effort. But that exploration can wait for another day. For now, there is only rest, only the gentle darkness, only peace. The stars that shone over ancient Sumer shine still. The same physics governs them now as governed them then. The same atoms cycle through the universe. The same fundamental forces shape reality. You are part of that continuity. You are a moment in the long flow of time. You are a point of consciousness in the vast cosmos. And right now, in this moment, you are simply a person resting in the darkness, breathing slowly, letting go. Let go of questions. Let go of wonder. Let go of thinking. Let go of everything except this simple presence, this breath, this moment, this peace. The night is deep and gentle. The darkness is soft and welcoming. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to solve, nothing you need to understand. Just rest. Just be. Just allow sleep to come if it will, or simply enjoy this quiet peace if it will not. The ancient world sleeps, the modern world sleeps, and you can sleep too, or rest, or simply exist peacefully in this moment. All is well, all is calm, all is exactly as it should be. The Anunnaki have played their part for tonight. The story has been told, the journey is complete. Now there is only silence, only darkness, only rest. Breathe in, breathe out, let go, sleep well.